Welcome. Thank you for coming. And you guys must be crazy to come talk about money. No one wants to do that. Either they're too embarrassed about it, or it's too stressful, or it's just too personal. But I thanks for coming. I appreciate you guys being here. I think today we're going to have a really good time because we're going to talk about something that's really important in our lives. And I think a lot of us struggle with it along the way. But the scriptures is amazing what it provides for knowledge on how to manage money. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from just north of Toronto, the Newmarket area. I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm married going on 30 years, and I have 2 daughters, 1 son-in-law, and a soon-to-be grandchild. So we're pretty excited about that come May. I am retired from the electronic manufacturing industry. That was my career. I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a teacher, and I'm not a pastor. But I'm very passionate about what God teaches on the Word of Finances. And so I remember I used to travel a lot in my career, and I remember I was on a flight getting near the end. I was about thinking of retiring, and I traveled a lot, and so I remember God just really placed this upon my heart. Tom and I were already friends. And so I think God was calling me then to volunteer with this, so it's exciting for me to be here to do this. Even if there was just 2 of you, I'd be excited to be here. It's kind of like when somebody becomes saved, how all the angels rejoice with just one being saved. To help people with something that is such a big part of our life is a real joy for not just me, but for the ministry, and that's why we do it. So the reason why I volunteer for the Copland Ministries is there's a simple goal. We want to teach biblical principles on how to manage money in every scenario, whether it's a really strong economy or during a challenging times such as now with higher interest rates and inflation and things like that. The goal is to eliminate debt, for us to eliminate our debt and stay out of debt. So I'm not going to ask for hands, but most of the people that we talk to are really struggling with debt and just staying afloat. Today's for you. We're going to talk a lot about that, and then but today is just going to be a teaser course, but today is really for you. But the goal is to get out of debt, build wealth so that we can become way more generous with the resources that God has given us. And there's a lot of joy that's in that, and we're going to talk about that. Anyways, that's the goal of the ministry, so I hope that sounds good to you guys. Also, this is not a prosperity gospel theology. I don't believe the Bible teaches that. Although I do believe that God blesses us through our obedience to Him and in us following His principles. I really believe that He blesses us for that. And there's one other thing I want to share with you is that I'm no different than you. I'm no smarter than you. In fact, some of you are probably smarter than me. But I was able to retire because my wife and I followed the biblical principles that we're going to talk about today. So if Scripture's wisdom can be a game changer for my wife and I know it will be a game changer for you as well. It's amazing how God walks us through this area of our lives. So like I said, with that said, today we're going to talk about the high level of what the Bible teaches on regarding managing money. And today's only going to be a teaser course because we have 4 hours together only. Now, if you go to Copland's website, you see their website on the screen there. There's classes offered throughout the year. One class that I teach a lot is a 12-week class. It's one night a week. Mine kind of goes to 3 hours because everybody's talking so much, which is the reason why you should take it. You'll get more value out of that than today, even though today's going to be interactive. There's a lot of chat amongst the people that attend the classes, and we learn from each other's experiences and each other's failures as well. So I would really encourage you guys to do that, and there's tons of resources on that website as well. So I really encourage you guys to sign up for a class, take the time to invest in it because it's helped so many people, and it's free. So how much did you guys pay to get here today? So the ministry, Tom Copland and his ministry is fantastic that way. Tom is so key. Like without saying names, but in the U.S. there's similar programs, but they charge for everything. Tom doesn't want to do that. And so it's just a great, great ministry. If you go on the website, there's so much material for you guys that's all free. And then like myself, I'm just a volunteer, and this is just something that God has directed us to do. So today's, again, it's not going to be a sermon. And again, I'm not a great teacher. I'm not a gifted teacher, so I have to refer to my notes. You're just going to get a guy that's going to talk about my own personal experience, my own journey, and a guy who's really passionate about it. So hopefully that we can learn from each other. I'm going to ask you questions along the way, so feel free to do the same, right? So that it doesn't turn into a lecture and it's not only my voice you hear all day long. The Bible has an incredible amount of wisdom in regards to money. How many verses do you think are in the Bible? My first question to you. How many verses do you think are in the Bible that talk directly about money, specifically about money? What's your guess? Anybody? Yes. Cheat sheet. That's great.
It's actually 2350.
Well, 2,350 verses. I had no idea about that until I got involved in the Copland ministry. So we're going to spend the morning going through those principles, and the last hour we're going to actually spend some time just doing some practical stuff. So the way I look at finances, and this may sound strange to you, you think when you talk about finances, it's all math, right? We're going to talk about math all day. That's actually the opposite. We're going to talk about the heart and the mind. It starts there. The math part is the easy part. It's the heart and the mind that's the difficult part. I always say, and you'll hear me say later today, is if you want to get to financial independence, it's 20% knowledge and 80% behavior. And that is very true. It's not hard. It's actually really simple. It's just the discipline to do it. A lot of people start it, and they just can't finish it. We're going to try to help you to come up with ways that you don't get frustrated, but to help you walk you through it. But there's still a discipline figure here. So we're going to talk about that. I also have a warning for you. Because of the influence of the world's that the world's perspective has on us, like the media, our work colleagues, and things like that, you're going to hear truths that are completely opposite to what the world teaches, and that may challenge your paradigm because you just have a certain way of seeing things, and we're going to challenge that because the scripture is very different than the world. So if this challenges you, if it kind of makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. That's okay. In fact, that might actually be a good thing. Here's a small, subtle example of that, of what I'm talking about. So I was watching the news last week, and I saw this heading that read like this: what is better, leasing or financing your next vehicle? How would you answer that question? What's better, leasing or financing your next vehicle? I saw this on the news. Neither. Yes. Yes. It's funny how they don't even have the option of, why don't you buy what you can afford and pay cash? It's not even an option in our world perspective. Borrowing money is such a big money maker. It is huge. And so the world makes us don't even think that it's an option. When you go buy a new car, they almost don't even want you to pay cash. They try so hard to convince you that you should lease this or finance this. We'll give you a better deal if you finance it. Really? Like I had that experience when I bought my last car. We can talk about things of that in that detail later. Anyways, that's just what I'm kind of talking about. That's how these perspectives are just so bizarre, right? Okay, let's get into what the Bible teaches us and how to relate. What the Bible teaches and how it relates to us today. So let me start with. Actually, let's see if we get this going here. Let me start with how we manage money. Does it impact our relationship with God? And does our relationship with God impact how we manage money? So let's start with that. So in Luke 16:11, Jesus said, "If you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches?" What do you think are God's true riches when it comes to managing money God's way? What do you think God's true riches are? This might be the toughest question I'll ask you all day. So one of God's true riches is a close personal relationship with God. The Apostle Paul considers a relationship with Christ to be more valuable than anything else, even when he was in prison. In Philippians 3:8 we read, "Indeed, I count everything as lost because of the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord. For his sake I have suffered and lost all things, and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ." So a close personal relationship is a true riches. What do you think another one is? God's peace. God's peace, Romans 8. "For to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace." Another true riches is God's joy. Psalm 16:11 says, "To make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." A fourth true riches is spiritual responsibility in an effective ministry. In 1 Timothy 3:3-5, we find, "An overseer of God's church must not be a lover of money, and must manage his own family well, which includes managing the family finances." And the fifth, experiencing of the joy in giving. In Acts 20, verse 35, Jesus said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." So as I read these words, I want you guys to think about them not just as words. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go through the morning. But for us to understand how blessed it is to give, how much more blessed it is to give than receive, you got to have I think we need a really close relationship with God for us to truly understand that. And we talk about all these truths or these true riches. They really, really blend together. Lastly, the word used in Greek for true means genuine and real. Why? Because true, genuine, real riches really count for eternity. And we're going to talk about that a bit more. Matthew 6:19-21, it reads, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." What was Jesus warning us in Matthew 6:24, which reads, let me read this to you. "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." What is Jesus warning us here?
Excessive amount of time being spent focused on what truly really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Being really ultimately eternally focused on what does matter, which is like you said earlier, close personal.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah. The love of money will replace our love for God. Yeah. Very good. What are some examples of someone serving money rather than God? What do you think some examples are of someone that has a love for money over God?
80 hours a week at work.
Yeah, that is one of them. Yeah. Yeah. What's that?
Where are you? You're always busy doing stuff, so you're not serving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Hobbies and other interests, things that are planning vacations, things that are truly spiritual, things that
Yeah,
are temporary and fall away.
that's right. Yeah. Good.
Like instead of going to church 3 years ago, you spend all the time so I can make more money.
That's right. Yes. Oh, that is a classic. Yeah. Which is the hard work scenario. So that's really good. Another one is they spend more than they earn. That's a sign. And then you start to accumulate debt, resulting in financial problems because of that distraction from the more important things like our relationship with God, or even our family and our spouse. I mean, a lot of families suffer when there's a love of money involved. Jesus said, "For where your treasure is, again, there your heart will be also." So another example is that we being materialistic and consistently wanting more and wanting to impress others with what you have. In 1 Timothy 6:9-10, Paul said, people who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager to make money have wandered from the faith and have pierced themselves with many griefs. Isn't it amazing that the scripture talks about even the details of our lives like that? That's so applicable today still. Like I just find that amazing. I mean, that hasn't changed. Number 3, hard work. Actually, excessive hard work. Not hard work. Actually, I'm a believer in hard work, to be honest, but when it becomes excessive, that's when it becomes a problem. Do you think the scripture talks about this? Well, let's read Proverbs 23, verses 4 and 5. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. I mean, we're taught to work hard, work for that dream. And here it's saying, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust in your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Another example of serving money is that we leave little or no time for God each day. And I'm going to read this verse, John 10, verses 27. I love this verse. It's short, it's sweet, it's easy to memorize, but it says so much. And what it says is, my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. And we're going to talk about this. This verse is huge for your financial journey, believe it or not. And we're going to talk about why that is. And I'm going to give you an example of what I experienced in my life from that. But when we spend time and we spend trying to build a close relationship with God, we're in tune to his voice. We hear it better. And that's why this verse is so key, and that's why you'll hear me talk about this a lot today. Number 5, we have little or no involvement in ministry, as you guys have mentioned. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. So are we allowing time to use our gifts to serve him versus just ourselves? That's a question we need to always ask ourselves. And number 6, we give very little to God's work. Proverbs 9, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled with overflow, and your vats will brim over with new wine. By the way, I'm going to repeat a lot of these verses throughout the morning because it's hard. I just want to emphasize them as we go, and it just applies so often. So that's so hopefully, and in fact, even when you do the course with Copland, we really encourage you guys to memorize some of these verses. Okay, let me ask you this question. Given that how we manage money impacts our relationship with God, we just kind of talked about that, right? Is the opposite true? Does our relationship with God impact how we manage money? How's that? How does that? Yeah. It's going to influence us, right? Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Becoming a Christian who has a close relationship with God will likely experience the following. This is really common to see this difference. They will be content with God's provision and thus avoid ungodly attitudes such as covetousness, selfishness, and greed. This goes back to John 10. My sheep hear my voice, right? We hear these convictions and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to just read 1 Timothy 6, verses 6-8. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. A person who has a close relationship with God is also likely to obtain God's wisdom in managing money. It's going to be a go-to, and you're going to hear a lot about that today. The number one thing when you have to make a financial decision, what do you think you have to do? The first thing. Yes, pray. Right? And that's going to be repeated today until ad nauseam. But I'm going to give you examples in my life of how that was a game changer for us. So in James 1, again, obtain God's wisdom in managing money. James 1, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously, all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Number 3, they will study and meditate on God's word and clearly understand God's financial principles. So, attain God's wisdom through prayer, and then study and meditate on his word. Joshua 1:8, keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you will be careful to do everything written in it. And then you will be prosperous and successful. Isn't that amazing how God uses success and prosperity as a reward for just being in his word? I just find that interesting. But it's funny how important this part of our life is. But how we need to really stay focused on our relationship with him. Number 4, they will follow God's principles, and therefore avoid many financial problems caused by violating God's financial principles. So Psalms 111:10, which reads, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding. And number 5, they will discern God's will when it comes to managing money. Again, Psalms 32:8. I'm throwing a lot of verses at you, but if you guys take notes on that would be fantastic. But to follow up on these, but Psalms 30. But I want to show you how the Scripture is so linked to this stuff. We're not going to go through all 2,350 verses, but we're going to go through quite a few of them. But in Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go, and I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. And again, John 10:27, you're going to start reciting it with me. That's all I'm going to say today is that, but my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. Number 6, they will give the first fruits of their income, and God will bless them. Their financial plans will not include giving God the leftovers. And number 7, they will have minimal debt and therefore avoid the pressures of creditors and high interest rates. So, how much in the news have you heard over the last few years about the interest rates? How drastic the prices have gone up for mortgage payment. What happens if you don't have any debt and the interest rates go up? How does that affect you? Do you care? You know what? It's actually the opposite. It actually is good for you. Right? Because, and this may sound terrible, and I don't mean this to sound terrible, but the truth is it's good for you because a lot of times you get more interest from your bank accounts, if you have, which I prefer to have a little money in there just because I want to invest it. But also there's opportunities that come up that people have a hard time and they have to sell. If you get a whole bunch of people that have to sell the same thing at the same time, that creates opportunities for those who have been faithful with their money and have been really good with it. It creates opportunities for those people. So interest rates going up, not only do you not care, it actually could create an opportunity for you. So that's the thing about this, right? Anyways, number 8, they will develop and implement a budget and thus make financial decisions based upon facts rather than on personal desires and gut feel. So remember Luke 14? Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, "Thus this person began to build and wasn't able to finish." And number 9, a Christian who has a close relationship with God is likely that they will obtain financial counsel first from God, second from God's word. Again, Psalm 119:24, your statutes are my delight and they are my counsel. And third, from godly financial advisors. 1 Corinthians 2:14, or 2 verses 14-15. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God. But consider them foolish. Can I repeat that? Do you guys mind if I repeat that? I want you to really listen to this. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness, and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things, but such a person is not subject to merely human judgment. Okay, let's talk about this for a bit. From my experience, after seeking God's direction, you may find financial decision that will look completely, you will make a financial decision that will look completely dumb or ignorant from the worldly perspective, but will prove to be the right decision. I'm going to give you an example of this in my life. I worked for a company that was a private company, and when I joined, we had this thing that when we brought on some people, they had to invest in the company. So when I joined this company, I had to invest in this company. They wanted us to have skin in the game, and I love that. And so I had to come up with a bunch of money to get the job. But our goal was that every employee had somewhat of shares, and it was private, so you had to be an employee to have shares. But the thing is, when you buy a private company, it's not what you call a liquid stock. You just can't sell it on the stock market any day you want. It's a long-term investment. So I was with the company for about 8 to 10 years, and then we decided that we wanted to expand. And again, we're manufacturing, electronic manufacturing. We want to open plants in the U.S. and China and Mexico. So we needed to bring in a flush of cash. So see, we went out looking for a holding company that invests in companies to help them to grow. So we opened up the stock market internal, say, hey, whoever wants to sell, here's an opportunity for you to sell. I struggled with that. I mean, I loved the place we were. We focused on culture a lot, so it was a great place to work. And since I bought that stock, this was how it looked. It went up, 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 up. It never even did this. It went up, 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 up. All of us were the shareholders, so we all were responsible. We all came to work knowing that we affect the share value. So it was a really hard-working culture. And I struggled with this. And so I remember going to our CFO and say, hey, Mike, and Mike's he's a great guy, smart guy, really great guy, a lot of fun to work with. Hey, Mike, what are you going to do? I'm not selling. Went to some other executives, hey, what are you going to do? I'm not selling. Why would you sell? And they're right. Logically, why would you sell? Our whole history has been like this, and we're working hard. We know what the future looks like. We have a 5-year plan. So what did I do? I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. I had like a week or two to make a decision. You couldn't believe how much I was praying about this. And then I'm driving home one day, and out of nowhere, and I'm praying as I'm driving home, out of nowhere, this question pops into my head. And the question was, why would you not sell? And I believe that came from the Spirit. I don't know where that question came from. And so it's funny, that's like interesting. And I started to think about that, and I go, greed. That's the only thing I could come up with. Greed is the only, because I just want more. Because I didn't want greed to dictate my life, and I knew it was a sin, I sold. I sold a bunch of my shares. By the way, that was in 2007. What happened in 2008? You guys remember that? Out of the blue, the crash, right? For the first time in our history, our stock started to do this. Our customers called us overnight and reduced their forecast, dramatically. Reduced their forecast. It was huge for us. We weren't losing money, we were losing revenue. So our stock market started to go down and down and down. And then when it kind of got really low, I started to buy back again. My colleagues thought I was brilliant. But I'm not, right? I'm not. I obtained financial counsel from God. I went to him in prayer. And it was from reading his word that I knew greed was a sin. And God put that thought in my mind of what I was doing, and that's what led me to make the right decision. Who could have predicted that? It was the worst decision. Probably all my colleagues said, "What are you doing? It doesn't make any sense," and they were right. But God knew the future. None of us knows the future. That's one example. I have many examples like this, but how the scriptures, following his principles, have led me to make the right decisions financially. And I'm no different than you, right? I'm no different than you. So in summary, I feel that a close relationship with God when I'm in prayer. That's when I feel closest to God, when I'm really has a strong prayer life. And a Christian with a close relationship with Christ will manage money God's way and experience God's peace and success in the area of finances. I really believe that. Just from that one example, I'll never forget that experience. And I hope you guys can use that to apply to your life and have those same stories to tell. Here's something else to think about when it comes to this. Have you ever heard or know of someone who came into a lot of money and they started to act entitled or selfish, right? And you thought to yourself, money changed them. Have you ever had that or know that? Money doesn't change people. Money exposes people. God changes people. If you know somebody that came into a lot of money and they started to act entitled or selfish, I guarantee, if you add them having a strong, close relationship with God into that equation, they will not be entitled or selfish. For when we have a close relationship with God, we hear and recognize his voice, and through the Holy Spirit's guiding, we are convicted in our sin nature, and we make the corrections. Money doesn't change, God changes us. It just exposes who we are. The same is true if we struggle with money. And our arguments with our spouse may be an all-time high because we're just having financial struggles. You add a close personal relationship with God into that equation, and that relationship will work together to fix the problems. A couple that does their devotions together and prays together, they win together. So again, how we handle money impacts our relationship with God, and our relationship with God impacts how we manage money. I got to say amen there. But it's true. So if you guys are struggling with your finances, that's the first place to start. It's not a math thing, is it? Okay, let's talk about God's promises and our stewardship responsibilities. What do these verses say about the ownership of your money and material things? Let me read these. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it, for he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. And in 1 Chronicles 29, everything in the heavens and the earth is yours, O Lord, and this is your kingdom. What do these verses say about our money and material things? Yeah. That's right. How about Leviticus 25:23? The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine and you are but aliens and my tenants. We're talking about real estate now. How about money? Haggai 22:8. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. But wait a second. Wait a second here. I have worked hard and I've used my skills and abilities to earn what I have. Therefore, isn't it my money, my car, my house, blah, 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 blah? How many of you have ever felt that way or know somebody who feels this way? So I've even seen it to a point of unattractiveness. And by that I say, there's people that I work with, they thought they were so good that the company would be nothing without them, and they ended up treating others around them with that attitude. That's how much of a paradigm shift this is. The question is, who gave us our skills and our abilities? Deuteronomy 8:17-18. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me, but remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gave you this ability to produce wealth. Is there anything that God does not own? So Job, who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under the sun belongs to me. I think he was kind of rebuking Job at that time, right? If I'm not mistaken. But the key biblical principle here is we are stewards or managers of the money that God has entrusted to us. He is the owner of everything that we have. Now, this is going to be the huge paradigm shift from what the world believes. This is the thing that is going to warn. This could be a challenge. This is one of these huge paradigm shifts. This is really difficult for people. In fact, I think the worldview would say, are you ignorant to believe this, or are you brainwashed to believe this? I mean, that would be the world's perspective on this, and it's not hard to understand how they would feel that way. But until you give God everything you have, you won't really understand that. Okay, what is the definition of biblical stewardship? Number one, using all assets, money and material things in accordance with God's principles and God's will. And number two, acknowledging in mind, heart that God owns absolutely everything. Your money, your home, your skills, and even your life. Even your life. I hope no one here has had to bury a child. My parents buried 3. And I want to share a part of that story with you. Actually, sometimes I hate telling this story because it affects me a bit. I wasn't even born, so don't feel sorry for me. I wasn't even born when this happened, but I had the one part of it, 2 brothers, Dennis and Richard. They were 6 and 7 years old. They drowned together. And you can imagine how devastated it was around my parents that time. And I went out for dinner with my mom when I was about 30 years old, and they never talked about it. And so I think I brought it up, and my mom said, I remember, Randy, I had this dream. I was sitting beside George. My dad is George. And he was as real sitting there as you are sitting there with me. As you and I see each other, it was as real as that, she said. And the doorbell rang. And George always gets up and answers the door, but he just sat there. He just kept reading. So all right, I'll answer the door. So I went to the door and I answered it. And there was a man standing there with Dennis and Richard. And he says to me, this is my mom telling me this. He says to me, will you look after my boys for me? And she goes, they're not your boys, they're my boys. And he said, no, they're mine. So it obviously helped my mom deal with it, but that is when she told me that story, that is when it really hit me how God owns even our children. Our children are entrusted to us. Not just our money and all that, just life is entrusted to us. Let's look at a secular person versus a biblical steward. So I have 2 questions for you. Do you think there's a difference between a secular perspective and a biblical perspective on managing money and material things?
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is a tremendous difference between the 2 perspectives. The second question is, do you think Christians ever fall into the secular mindset? Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. London Freedom 55 back in the day.
Oh,
That was a huge thing, where they were promising you that investing in their insurance kind of policy, that by the time you turn 55,
Yeah.
you'll be financially stable, free from all debt.
yeah,
It was the furthest thing from the
the
truth.
truth, yeah. It was a marketing tagline.
We fell into it, we got out of it probably within 2 years because we realized the only one that was going to be free to 55 was the guy who sold us the policy.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah. But you're right. Unfortunately, sometimes even committed Christians inadvertently fall into the secular mindset. I had this aha moment when I was 20. So I was in my 20s. I was mid-20s. I was backpacking. I was abroad backpacking, just kind of experiencing things and, And all I had in my ownership was what I was wearing and what was in my backpack. That's all I owned. And I was living on $38 a day. Back then you could do that. So that included my shelter, which was hostels and food and any attractions that we were going to see. I was backpacking through Europe. And I had this aha moment. You know what it was? I remember one day I was just walking and I'm thinking, I have never been as happy as I am now. And I wasn't thinking about owning a Jaguar or whatever. And I realized I hadn't watched television for 2 months. That's what it was. I wasn't being influenced, and I didn't and I made me think about, I can't believe how easy I'm influenced because I'm just so happy now because commercials really say you need this to be happy. And I remember God just showing to me that it was this aha that, look at how you have hardly anything, and look how happy you are. And that was that moment in my mid-20s. I realized it's not material things that make us happy. It was a huge moment for me. I never forgot. I'm telling you about it today. But it's funny how we can be so easily influenced. It's scary in a way, isn't it? There are 12 comparisons of typical actions and attitudes of secular person versus a biblical steward. So let's go through those. This is going to be common sense. You guys are going to look at it and go, but we don't think of it until we see it. Okay, the secular person believes that they own their own resource, or they own their material resources. And the biblical steward acknowledges that God owns everything and that we are managers of God's resources. 1 Timothy 6:7, for we brought nothing in the world and we can take nothing out of it. And Psalms 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, for he founded upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Number 2, the secular person looks to self and the wisdom of the world for direction. The biblical steward looks to God and his word for direction in using financial resources. Psalms 1:1, blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seats of the mockers. And James 1:5, I love this one too. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, for it will be given to him. What are some examples of what we may do in following the wisdom of the world in regards to handling money? What are some examples of that? Yeah. Any other examples you can think of? How about, oh no, go ahead. Yes. That is, we're going to talk about that today, brother. Oh yeah. So borrowing freely. So you're kind of down that path. Borrowing freely is an example, right? Or participating in the buy now, pay later type stuff, right? How about borrowing money to invest and saying it's smarter to invest using other people's money or take advantage of the low interest rates? Isn't that logical? But that's a worldly perspective in some ways. So, and we're going to talk about debt and how when we borrow money, we're assuming that we can afford it. So we're thinking of the future that we can do it. Here's an example of that. What happened over the last 10 years or so? You may have heard this. A lot of people were going out and buying properties on speculation. These new developments would show up. People, I don't know if you've ever driven by them. When they open the office, say we're going to sell these lots, and we're going to be lineups, like lineups of cars going in to buy a house in that development. A lot of those people were buying them without ever planning on moving in. Because they were always it would take them 2 years to complete the project. They buy it at this price. 2 years' time, it'd be worth this much money. They would buy it, take possession, and resell it for more money. Boom, they just made $200,000 without even moving in. And they were going around telling their friends and relatives, you got to do this. I did this twice. I've made $400,000. And they did. It was great. So the relatives started doing the same thing. What happened now? What's happening now? They bought it 2 years ago at the peak. Now it's when they take possession, it's actually worth less, and they can't sell it. They're losing money, and they're stuck, right? And then the banks are going to say, I can't give you this much loan because it's not worth that much. So it's a mess. A lot of people are walking away from $200,000 if the builder will let them out. You see, so it works for some, but it's not. If you can't handle those payments, you can't predict the future. That's the thing about that, right? It's logical to do that because people were succeeding at it, but it's not always there. If God's not leading you to make that call, to make that investment, if you're just doing it based on what you could run into problems. And now we're seeing an example of that. Okay, number 3, God gives the secular person. Gives God and his works the leftovers, which are usually small, if anything at all. And the biblical steward gives the first fruits to God's work. And again, 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give. And we're going to talk more about this a little later. Not reluctantly or under compulsion, but for God loves a cheerful giver. Proverbs 3, 9 to 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, and then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Number 4, the secular person is generally discontent with present level of income and wants more. A biblical steward is content with God's provision. Hebrews 13:5, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Luke 3:14, be content with your pay. Timothy 6:6-8, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. Does this mean that we should never look for a higher paying job? Yeah, great. It's the love of money that entraps us, creating a whole list of issues in our life, right? It's our attitude of complaining that does not reflect a positive witness. Is when we complain about where we're at. Complaining about our income confirms that our focus is on worldly things and not putting him first because we're focused on it. That's why we're complaining about it. Yeah, I don't think it's wrong to look for a job that's higher paying at all. But can I give you a little tip here? This is a bit from my career now. Don't go after a job because it's higher money, even though you know you won't like that job. That would be a mistake. And don't take a job where you know the culture is a bit toxic. They have a high turnover rate, but it's higher pay, and that's really common because they can't keep their people because it's such a toxic environment that they have to offer more to attract people to come. Don't do that either. It changes you. When you're in an environment like that, it changes who you are. And I wouldn't recommend it. Here's an example of this actually. So electronic manufacturing industry, we had low margins, so we had to be really careful. So we had a lot of engineers work for us. So we couldn't pay the top dollar like BlackBerry. You guys remember BlackBerry when they could pay their engineers way more because their profit margins are way higher than ours. We had an engineer that come to us and says, "Hey, listen, I'm so sorry, but BlackBerry approached me. I had 100 approach them, and he says, I'm going to make $15,000 more a year if I move to BlackBerry. 15 grand more. This is back a few years even, right? And it was, dude, we can't. We love to have you stay. We just can't. We can't afford that. So you have our blessing. And so he went out, and 8 months later, he calls us back and says, hey, is there still an opportunity? Is there an opening for me there still? Well, yeah, I'd love to have you back. Come on back. So he came back and worked for us, and I ran into him and I said, what happened? I didn't really, because we really focused a lot on culture where we were. Like, we really valued our people. We made that as part of our strategy. He says, I didn't realize how much I'd missed the culture. That 15 grand didn't seem so much anymore. So you know what I did? His brother worked for us too. His brother didn't leave. His brother stayed. And we had townhouses where everybody gathers. We do that once a month or so, and you just tell them what we're doing, how we're doing as a company, that kind of stuff. And so I always was involved in that. So I grabbed my Bible and I read The Prodigal Son, right? How this guy left and, went squandered it, and his brother stayed, and his brothers all, So I kind of used that it was kind of funny to do it. But that's an example where a guy left. 15 grand didn't seem as much to him. He just didn't put the value on how important it was for him to have a good place to work. So these are just kind of tips that I'm kind of sharing just from my experiences. But it's okay to find more. In fact, a lot of times we have to move jobs in order to get more money, because that's the nature of the game. But let's not be focused on it. Number 5, a secular person struggles with fear of the future or fear of losing assets. The biblical steward puts God first and trusts him to provide for needs. Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Remember that one. That's a good one to memorize. Matthew 6:33. Do not worry. Or Matthew 6:31-33. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Tell me what you think. People with less money are more likely to stress over money than those who have lots of money? What do you think?
I think people have great wealth are stressing something as well. The simple fact is that what they took to achieve it and maintain it and keep it can be a great stress.
Yeah. They did studies on this, eh? They found that the more money you have, the more stressed they are about money, because they're more stressed about losing it than those. I was blown away when I read that research. I couldn't believe it. I thought, man, struggling with money, that's stressful. But they actually found that it was actually more stressful the more you have because of that reason. It's interesting. Number 6, the secular person believes we are accountable to no one. We can do with our money as we wish. The biblical steward believes that we are accountable to God for how we use the money that he has entrusted to us. Romans 14:12. So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. And then Matthew 25. Take the talents from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has been given more, and for everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. So the unfaithful steward in this parable didn't so much waste the master's money. He wasted an opportunity. As a result, he was judged for being wicked and lazy. So we will be held accountable for how we use our gifts and talents, as well as our resources, when it comes to serving God. Number 7, the secular person uses money to buy things that are temporary. In short, or is short-sighted, as their investments are treasures on earth. That's a secular perspective. And then the biblical steward uses the money and material things that God has provided for eternal purposes. Again, Matthew 6, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. And in 1 Timothy 6:17, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Let's talk about our investment strategy for a second here. Absolutely, it's important to invest for our future here on earth, but don't ignore investing into your eternal future, for that will last a whole lot longer than our time here on earth. Make sure your first fruits go to your eternal investments first to avoid Satan tricking you into believing that temporary is more important and more meaningful. Thus, you run out of money for giving. Right? So that is a real common thing that the Satan uses, that we need more stuff to be happy. Number 8, the secular person believes that financial success arises as a result of one's own hard work. We or I made it happen. And again, thank God for the talents and abilities that God has given, which would include the ability to earn an above average income. Deuteronomy 8, you may say to yourself, my power, my strength, and my hands have produced this wealth for me, but remember, it is him who gave it to us. And in 1 Chronicles 29, 12, and 13, wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now our God will give you thanks. We give you thanks and praise your glorious name. We can also look at James 4:6. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. The 9th, secular person looks for opportunities to make a lot of money quickly and wants to get rich quick. The biblical steward does not try to get rich quick, but works faithfully wherever God has directed. Proverbs 23:4, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off. In Proverbs 28:19-20, he who works his land will have abundant food, but the one who chases fantasies will have his fill of poverty. A faithful man will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished. I believe from a biblical wealth building strategy, slow is fast. That's what I believe. You're more likely to become financially independent by investing over the long term, not expecting 20 plus 30% returns, but earning a more modest long-term return. I teach my kids that. They're in their 20s, start investing now. If you invest this little bit, by the time you're my age, you'll be a millionaire. Just by doing a little bit now. And that's so true. So that's why we don't get bent out of shape when somebody, and this happened a lot to me. So you go to work and somebody say, hey, how's your investment? Oh, man, I'm making 20%, 25% returns right now. And there were times that was that. And it's funny, when people are making that, they kind of like to talk about it. I noticed, but those same people, when the market turns, they'll be losing 20, 25%. They never talk about that. So don't get bent out of shape. If you're making this much, but they're making that much return, don't let that, oh man, I got to figure out what they're doing. Just stay the course. Don't let that influence you too much. Slow is fast. And don't try to get rich quick. The secular person, number 10, wants to keep up with the Joneses. And a secular person or a biblical steward is content with God's provision. Exodus 20. You shall not covet your neighbor's house or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And in Philippians 4:13 or 11-13, Paul writes, for I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. And I can do anything through him who gives me strength. Does any of you remember what Paul's circumstances were when he wrote this? He was in prison. He was not acting like a victim, was he? So I believe that embracing contentment, this is really important. Embracing contentment is the key to reaching financial independence. And we're going to talk about that a little later on. It was so critical for my wife and I on our journey. It really, really was. And I want to encourage you I want to encourage you guys to track your expenses, and we're going to talk about this later on too, and to implement a budget. How many of you, well actually I don't want to put you on the spot. Let me say it this way. Most 90% of people don't have a budget. Right? And I want to encourage you strongly, track your expenses, and we'll talk about why, and have a budget. But without contentment, following a well-intended budget will even be a lot more difficult. You can have the best, the most accurate budget out there, but if you don't have contentment to go along with that, your battle has just gotten more difficult. So contentment is a key, I believe it is a key ingredient into a financial freedom. I really do. Number 11, a secular person generally either spoils or provides unnecessary wants and desires or neglects their family. And the biblical steward provides for the needs of the family. Ecclesiastes 5, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And 1 Timothy 5 and 8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And 12, the characteristics of a worldly perspective are prideful, greedy, fearful, dishonest, selfish, covetous, trust in self, loves money, unrighteous, and frustrated. The characteristics of a biblical steward are humble, almost the opposite, right? Humble, generous, faithful, honest, content, loves the Lord, righteous, peaceful, and trusts God. Let me ask you this question. Can money in and of itself be corrupt or evil? No? Yeah, you're right. I agree. Because money is neither moral nor immoral. Money is neither spiritual or unspiritual. Money can be used to further God's kingdom, or it can be used for purposes that are clearly contrary to God's word. It can do both. Money is absolutely neutral. There is nothing inherently good or bad about money in and of itself. Furthermore, it is God who created money. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. And it is God who owns the money. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. Therefore, money in and of itself cannot be considered corrupt or evil. It's us, right? It's us. Let me ask you this question. Is it wrong for a Christian to have lots of money and material things? I agree. Abraham, David, Solomon, and Job are examples of godly men who God entrusted significant amounts of wealth. So the most important thing is not the amount of money we have, but our attitudes towards it. And it's these attitudes or motives that will determine how we will use the money and the resources that God has entrusted to us. Proverbs 62 states, all of a man's way seems innocent to him, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Okay, let's talk about giving. All of us, we've been taught about giving, especially if it's like that growing up in the church. So what do you remember about what you've been taught so far on giving? We want to share some things that when they think of tithing or giving, what do they think about? 10%? Minimum 10%. Okay, anything else? Should be 20. When you guys heard that this course is being added on, or was being offered here, that the elders wanted to do this for their congregation, do you think, is this going to be another course on giving? Did you guys think that?
We were told it wasn't going to be that.
You're right. So I want to put a little bit in here only because it's part of our financial journey, right? So let me just give you my perspective. In fact, I took out a bunch of slides. There's a whole session on this that talks about the Old Testament, what the Old Testament teaches on giving, and what the New Testament. We're going to focus on what the New Testament teaches on giving, what Christ taught. So, one of the key biblical principles on giving taught us is again, it's taught us in the New Testament, is God wants us to focus on eternal values, not temporal things. Giving to God's work allows you to convert the temporal assets of money into something that has eternal benefits. 1 Timothy 6:17-19, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Be generous and willing to share. I didn't read the whole verse, but that's the gist of it. What instructions does God give us in Proverbs 3:9-10? Let me read that for you. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. What is God's instructing us to do here? Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's right. So when we are struggling with a lot of debt and we're working on that budget to pay off that debt, what's the easiest thing in our spirit to say, pull that out of the giving part, right? That's our first thing, and I get it, right? But yeah. So, what God is saying here, that God wants us to make giving to his work a priority. If you do not give God the first fruits, then God gets the leftovers, which are usually small and sometimes zero. Oops. And when you give God the leftovers, you will not experience the joy and blessings of giving. What do you think may cause us to give God the leftovers? What do you think it is? I kind of mentioned one of them already. And I think you mentioned it too. What's that? Actually, yeah, good. Lack of trust. The attitude of money, right? It's my money, I earned it. I want to buy more stuff with it. Another one is, again, too much debt, which brings us back to the first one, right? I just want more stuff. That's pretty much is what keeps us from doing that. He also says, giving to God work on a regularly and systematically. So this is taught in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul instructed the Corinthians to give regularly. So let's look at 1 Corinthians 16:1-2. Now about the collectors for God's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collection will have to be made. So it doesn't have to be weekly. It could be bi-weekly if that's how you're paid, or it could be monthly if that's how you're paid, right? The problem is that people often wait till the Christmas joyful season to give, right? And so a couple problems with that is, one is a lot of times we don't have much left over by then because we spend it. And the other problem to that is that we have monthly needs, monthly cash flow needs. Ministries, churches, they all have monthly cash flow needs too. It's really hard for those ministries to budget if the majority of their givings are all clumped in one time of the year. So it's really important that we give systematically and regularly. Another key thing Christ taught us about giving is to give generously. Jesus said, "Give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed together, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." So notice there's no reference to percentage here. Jesus is referring to being generous. So that 10% thing, I kind of still go by that as a tithing. In my life, I do a tithing and then I do a gift giving. It's all above that's the generous part. But I try to keep myself disciplined in the 10% minimum, but then the rest is about the generous part. Again, 2 Corinthians 9, 6, and 7, remember this. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Give what you have decided in your heart to give, for God loves a cheerful giver. The more you give to God's work with the right heart, then the more God will entrust to you. And it's true, God, we cannot outgive God. We can't. And in the parable of the hidden treasures and the fine pearls, the emphasis is that the kingdom of heaven is of such great value that you should be prepared, if need be, to give up absolutely everything you own to obtain it. Does everybody remember those parables? I can read it real quick. Let me do that. Matthew 13. The kingdom of heaven is like treasured, hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. So again, the emphasis is on these hidden treasures. The kingdom of God is of such great value that everything else we have should be of less value to it. It is not about the percentages again of what will be, for that's going to be different for all of us, right? God just wants us to be a generous giver and give according to His will and the income that He has entrusted to us. So it's not about percentages, it's about your heart. When you enter into the presence of the Lord in heaven, that will be a day of accountability. So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. So that's all I'm going to cover on giving today, but are there any questions that you guys have on that? So just a little bit on that today, but it is definitely part of our journey. God will, I really believe, I don't believe in prosperity gospel like I said earlier, but I believe God does bless us if He can trust us, right? 10:15. Perfect time for a little break. Is everyone... Okay. Okay, how was that so far? Are we learning something? Good. Or nice reminders, maybe? Yeah. Every time I teach this, I'm amazed. I keep learning more and more, and I'm amazed how much Scripture talks about every little aspect of our lives, how there's a verse to talk to. It's just amazing. I mean, we always think of the Bible as saying how you got to love one another and all, which is all great stuff, but when it even talks about practical stuff like this so clearly, I just find it amazing. It's an amazing book. It's amazing. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly. I've never taught it before. I always do the 12-week course, so I might have to skip some stuff because I do have a goal at the very end, the last hour or so, but we'll see what we can get through before our next break. Okay, so let's go over a few financial deceptions. These are things that we often face in our world. So this world, we are bombarded with all kinds of false concepts regarding finances, and I'll call them financial deceptions. Financial deceptions are beliefs that appear to be correct, but are contrary to God's principles and often tempt people to get into debt. And remember, debt is a really big business, right? So you can see why we're being enticed to do it. Do you think living paycheck to paycheck is common in our society today? What do you guys think about that? Yeah, I think it's probably getting worse now, right, with the struggles we've had over the last couple of years. It is, and that this is really the first financial deception. God says, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. Most people fall into the foolish category as they do not regularly save for things such as, what do you think? Here's a key one. Anticipated non-monthly expenses like property taxes, annual insurance premiums, automobile replacement. Everybody knows an automobile is going to wear out, but we don't save for the next one. And the world says, yeah, you don't save for that. You just take out another loan. Some people just believe that I just lease my vehicles. They'll have a loan for the rest of their lives. That's how they view it. And we'll talk about that more later. So also, they don't save for normal, unexpected expenditures or expenses. Things like automobile, again, or home repairs or automobile replacement. Things that can go wrong and will go wrong. We just know that that's just part of life. We don't save for an emergency fund to cover unexpected reduction in our income. So let me talk about emergency fund for a sec. Emergency fund should be 3 to 6, 9 months of. So if you track your expenses, you know what you need every month to live. You know where your money's going. If you know that, and you lose your income, and let's say you saved up 3 months, you now have 3 months to cover all your expenses without worrying about it. You have 3 months to find a new job to replace that income. Because if you don't, what are you going to do? You're going to take on more debt. You're going to put stuff on credit cards. Well, I can't afford food because I didn't have enough money saved, so now there's no emergency fund in place. If your job is really secure, 3 months probably is enough, because the likelihood of you losing your job, like some government jobs, are pretty secure. But if it's not secure, I would suggest 6 months at least. So that gives you 6 months to be able to replace that income without having to worry about it. And there's severance pay, I get all that. That plays in the equation. Think about COVID. I thought about this when COVID hit, and the government went out and printed a whole bunch of money so that they became our emergency fund. And what did that do to us? Not only to us now, what we're experiencing now, but for our kids and the next generation. If we every Canadian had an emergency fund, we would be the cream of the crop on the world stage. The government would not have to print money. The CERB would never have existed. We wouldn't need it. Our emergency fund would have taken us through COVID. And we would be way better off financially as a country, not even in our costs. It would have had a huge impact if we taught that one principle. So what scares me about COVID is that now it's enforced that I don't need to save. Government will take care of me. That scares me, right? So now this worldly perspective has now just been reinforced, right? Please don't think that way. Have an emergency fund. Be disciplined. Have that in place that you don't have to rely on that, right? Okay, and another one is long-term needs, and that's, again, retirement and even kids' education, right? A lot of times we need to, we don't save for that. Jesus himself recommends that we save for future needs. So again, Luke 14, suppose you want to build a tower, will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it, or he has to complete that? So again, living paycheck to paycheck is a financial deception because it is not consistent with God's word. For God admonishes that we should plan and save for future needs. I mean, that's just really clear throughout Scripture. The second deception is debt restructuring will solve all my financial troubles. I think most people do that. That's what, when they see a counselor to help them with their finance, a worldly counselor, we're going to do debt consolidation. This will help you reduce your interest rates and all that kind of stuff. So common steps used to deal with excessive debt include, what do we do? What are we told to do? A personal line of credit to pay off the credit cards. Credit cards are high interest rates. Let's get a lower interest rate. Let's get a personal line of credit, and you'll be fine. What are 2 reasons why it's not a good idea to withdraw, what's associated with a personal line of credit? What are the risks associated is what I'm trying to say. What are the risks associated if you use a personal line of credit to deal with debt? Yes, making more debt, you said? Yeah. So how about if you only pay the interest each month? So personal lines of credit, you just have to pay the interest. You don't have to pay the principal, right? So what happens? You have this debt that goes on and on and on and on and on and on because you're not paying down. You're just paying the minimum, which is just the interest rates. And then as the interest rates go up and down, your goal is really to eliminate all your debt. You don't buy bandages, or you don't do that. You just want to eliminate your debt. But personal lines of credit is a huge one that people use to restructure their financial problems. Another one is they take out a second mortgage, and this is commonly done to consolidate debt. Get much lower interest rate. That's the strategy. And then another one is they withdraw money from their retirement plan to pay off debt. And again, what are two reasons why it is not a good idea to withdraw money from your retirement plan to pay off debt? What are the two reasons why that's not a great idea? What's that? Yeah, I have to pay taxes on it. Right. So you'll be, especially if it's an RRSP, you're paying tax on it, so your tax bracket will go up for that year. You're also stealing away from your future needs, not only just the amount you took out, but the accumulation of the amount, the growth of that. You stole from the future, from your future needs, right? So remember, you're restructuring your debt is important to acknowledge that, yes, you're lowering your interest rates, but are you dealing with the real problem, right? Are you dealing with the real problem? And that could be you're spending more than you're earning. That's typically what people are doing when their debt goes up and up and up. They don't know what their expenditures are versus their income. And it could be really gradual. And people say, I don't know what I'm doing. But my debt just keeps going up and up and up and up, and they have no idea what's causing it. So when you restructure, you're not solving the root cause. Okay, so common reasons for spending more than one earns over a long period of time include what? What causes us to spend more than we earn? We're talking about attitude still, right? Here's one, lack of knowledge. God admonishes us in Proverbs 24, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Another reason why we spend more than we earn over a long period of time is the good old-fashioned lack of discipline. Proverbs 13:18, whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored. How about our unwillingness to sacrifice as needed? So a lot of times in our budget, we get ourselves in trouble. We got to have a little bit of short-term pain for that long-term gain. And another one is dealing with a spiritual problem such as ungodly attitude or mindsets. So some of the ungodly attitudes and mindsets, again, let's believe that money and material things will bring us happiness and peace. That's something that we may struggle with, right? Or just being proud, wanting to keep up with the Joneses, believing that we are independent of God even. These are some attitudes that keep us from maybe spending more than we're actually, or spending more than we're actually, and versus what we're earning. So, what really attitudes towards money? What are? Believing money and material things, this is kind of a bit of a recap. Believing money and material things will bring happiness. Having an unbiblical desire to get rich and quickly. Serving money rather than God. Treasure money, material things rather than things of eternal value. Greed and selfishness. The lack of contentment in their thinking, and they're ungrateful for God's provision, which is kind of goes with the contentment part. What are some spiritual problems that can lead to financial problems? What do you think they are? Some spiritual problems that lead to financial problems. We talked about some of them already. What's an obvious one? Say a little louder. You're right, yeah. How about covetousness? Greed. Lack of contentment. Selfishness. Pride. Right? All these attitudes and mindsets are contrary to God's word, right? So let me just read a couple of verses. Hebrews 13:5, when it comes to lack of contentment, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God said, I will never leave you, never will I forsake you. And in Luke 12:15 on greed, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. So this is one of the key things that God used again in that example that I gave. Because I knew what the word said on greed, and use that to help me make the right decision on the financial decision. And James 4:6, God, when it comes to pride, God opposes the proud but shows favor for the humble, or to the humble. Okay, what is required of us? What is required of us? Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. When it comes to finance, it's okay to be seen as weird, by the way. Because we're talking things that the world doesn't really get. I mean, who wants to eliminate their debt? Who wants to buy a used car? Who wants to keep a budget even, right? It's just there's so many things that we are kind of contrary. Don't worry about it. I've had good friends from my church that think I'm weird because I track my expenses faithfully and I have a budget, right? They think this thing is nuts. I think there's some of them feeling guilty that they're not doing so. That's how they react to it. But don't let it bother you is my point. Be weird, right? Be different. Because we're following God's principles here. Okay, how do we change the way that we think? How do we do that? Let's read Joshua 1 verse 8. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate it on a day and night. That's why remembering some of these scriptures is a great way for God to prompt us when we're kind of up against a decision we have to make financially. So that you may be careful to do everything written in it, then you will be prosperous and successful. So we spent the last hour or so talking and learning about what God says about finances, but until we actually implement and do what we learn, it's meaningless. So I can talk to I'm blue in the faith. I could read 1 million scriptures for you. It's that 80% that we need, right? So we got to go home. So if you're struggling financially or you don't know what to do with the debt you have, get on your knees and just pray for God's direction and even for your own discipline, right? Even for myself, I have to still do that. Because I don't want to make it as far as I've gone and then blow it. You could be how financially stable you are, you can still blow it. I can still blow it. So don't ever get proud, oh, I've accomplished it. No. It's always a journey. It's always a battle. Actually, battle's a little harsh, right? But it's always a journey because when you get there, there's such a motivation, there's such a peace, there's such, where you become more generous because you just had God is so much, you just see how God has worked in your life in this area. So financial deception number 3. Smart people use other people's money. I mean, so if I could say this bluntly, that is a lie. The only way that is true is what? If we can predict the future, right? If we can predict the future and we know what the market's going to do or what the economy is going to do. That's the only way that is not a lie. And when you hear guys on the news or whatever, they have these predictions. I'm actually starting to see this less. I'm hearing guys saying, I don't know, but this is what I think. So I like that's kind of changed a bit. But when I heard this drives me crazy. I was watching CP24 or something like that. And they have these realtor guys that they bring on every once a week and they interview them they answer all these questions and that kind of stuff. There's this one real estate agent about a month ago. He goes, if you don't buy now, you're going to miss out for the next 10 years. Word for word. If you don't buy now, you're going to miss out for the next 10 years. Oh man, I was boiling inside because the real estate agents are hurting for sales right now. You've heard the news that 45,000 left the industry, and I have a real estate friend, and she goes, I might have to get another job. Because right now, I think they're averaging 1.5 sales on average, but that means somebody's getting 5 and 3 others are getting 0 sales, which is 0 income for them. So this guy, to try to scare us to start buying and spending to keep his job, he tells us silly things like that if you miss now, you're going to miss out. Not just the next, you're going to miss for 10 years out. It's scaring us. and that guy's on TV. That bothers me a little bit, right? Because those are lies, right? But anyways, that's what happens. So anyways, it's smart to use other people. That's a lie. And the absolute truth is that only God knows the future. We can make our best guess about the future, but often we're wrong. And often the experts are wrong. When they're not right, the first thing you hear come out of their mouth is, oh man, I didn't expect that. And it's true. I mean, but that's why a lot of them are saying now, this is what I think, but really don't know. Isaiah 46:10. From the beginning, I predicted the outcome. Long ago, I foretold what would happen. I said that my plans will never fail, that I would do everything I intend to do. And in Proverbs 27:1, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. In other words, there is no sure deals out there, right? We just can't predict the future. So what is the opposite of using other people's money? Right. And using minimal debt, or better yet, no debt at all. Right? When you use other people's money, that's all debt. So the opposite of that is using minimal debt or no debt at all. And Scripture supports that. In Deuteronomy 28, God promised his people that if they fully obey him, they will be lenders, not borrowers. So no matter how we read Scripture, the Bible considers debt to be a curse, not a blessing. No matter how we look at Scripture, it's seen as a curse, not a blessing. Again, it is not a sin to borrow. It is not a sin to borrow money. It's a sin to borrow and not repay, but it's not a sin to borrow money. So that's not what we're saying here. So there are some things that we need to borrow money for, like typically a house and that kind of stuff. But consumer debt, there's really no excuse. We can really get around, we can avoid that. Oops. However, God warns the dangers of debt, and God instructs us to put him first and trust in him, not the banks, to meet our needs. Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will what? Make your path straight. Here's another true statement. During difficult times, those who use debt suffer most, and those who, with cash, find great opportunities or bargains. I talked about that already, right? When the interest rates go up and you have no debt, you don't care. But it could create opportunities for you. So the key point, from God's perspective, smart people do not use other people's money, but rather smart people borrow as little as possible, and they pay it off as soon as possible. How does the world define financial freedom? And how does God define financial freedom? So these two questions lead us to deception number 4. Financial freedom is attained by having lots of money. And again, we talked about this earlier. Studies have shown that wealthy people have no peace in the area of finances. So don't kid yourself. Wealthy people are not financially free. They are stressed out by money. Why? Because they're stressed out over where they have to invest it. And also they're stressed out they may lose it. Right? So the studies have shown that. True financial freedom comes only from having God's peace in the area of finances. In John 14:27, Jesus said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." If you guys want true peace, I strongly encourage you to rely on God and not on your portfolio, how big or how small it may be. How do we obtain God's peace when it comes to finances? So first, believing that God and the truth in his word will help you combat the deceptions of this world. That's why it's so important to understand the scripture on this. And that's what I appreciate what Tom has done. He's pulled all these verses together into one discussion. And for us to know that it'll help us to combat the deceptions of the world. They'll stick out like red. Just like when I saw that article, what's better, lease or finance your vehicle? That stood out like a sore thumb to me. Jesus said, if you hold my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And number 2, learn to be content with God's provision. That's a key, and that's going to be a common theme. As Paul taught, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. And again, I believe contentment is half the battle to achieving financial freedom. It is half the battle. 3, acknowledge that the accumulation of money and material things is temporary and not of any eternal value. And for how do we obtain God's peace and joy? It's through giving. It is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And again, give with a cheerful heart, and that is a true statement of our love for God, and that's why it enables us to get free from the love of money. If you don't have that joy, you're not going to benefit from that. I almost would say don't give. Get back on your, start talking to God about that. And 5, recognize that you are stewards, not an owner. Our responsibility is to apply God's financial principles and do God's will. That's our responsibility. Once we have fulfilled our responsibility, we can cast our cares on the Lord and trust God to meet our needs. This should enable us to experience God's peace. This will enable us to experience God's peace. And then again, Psalm 55:22. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. So in summary on this one is that financial freedom comes from having lots of money and material things. That's a deception. True financial freedom comes only from God's peace, joy, contentment, and in the area of finances. You go to YouTube and you could do a search. There's a ton of videos on wealthy, famous people that talk about how unhappy they are despite their wealth and despite their fame. There's a ton of it on there. And if you need to be encouraged by that, just listen to a couple of these people. They're not Christians, but they're just telling about how they didn't expect to be where they're at, or what it feels like that they've achieved their dream. And I love the fact that they're being open and honest about that, but it is just really, really common. Financial deception number 5. Let me just say this. Having a lot of money may make life easier, but it doesn't make it happier. And those of us who don't have a lot of money, it's hard to really believe that, isn't it? That's why listen to those who have it, and then you'll just to kind of see what the truth really is. Financial deception number 5, it makes sense to buy now and pay later. Today, lots of things can be purchased with little or no down payment, or no interest, or no payments for the first 3 months, etc., etc., etc. This easy credit creates a temptation to buy now and pay later. Okay, so why are these programs unhealthy for us? Buy now, pay later programs. Why are they so unhealthy for us? Does anybody know the details to these things? How many people think sign on the dotted line, there is sold on the tagline, thinking that this is the greatest thing since ever. This is awesome. I can take this home and I don't have to pay for it for a whole year.
Gives a false sense of thinking that you're actually gaining something, when in actuality you're gaining nothing.
Yeah.
When the time does come to pay, usually with promotions and products like that, interest rates are so incredibly high.
They are.
You might as well just gone to Vito down the street and got the money from him.
Yeah.
Just like having your notes book.
Their interest rates are higher than credit card interest rates.
29-30%.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't know that. And here's another thing. They're designed to look like they're an advantage for us, but in reality, okay, let me just go back to the basics. In reality, they enable us to buy things we don't really need. Or they enable us to buy things we just can't afford. So I get a high percentage of people that take those loans or take those deals, they don't pay them off at the end of the year. So what happens is, you're right, the interest rates are enormous, but they get charged interest rates from the day they took it out of the store. And they start paying interest on all that time frame. It's not just, a year later, I got it free for a year. No. Now you start paying interest because you didn't pay it off here. Most don't know that. So you didn't gain a thing. You lost it. Now, there might be the odd person that does it. Majority of them don't. Right? So that's why I want to call that a deception, right? So in Psalm 37:7, God directs us to wait for his provision and his timing. Rest in the Lord with and wait patiently for him. And then Lamentations 3:24 states, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. If you have a need, and if you pray and wait upon the Lord, know that God can provide in many ways, such as unexpected income, even a better deal, or perhaps another alternative. There are so many stories out there where people who committed their financial decisions to prayer first, that God actually provided things for free by somebody else, because God spoke to somebody else and said, hey, Jim needs a car. Hey, Jim, do you need a car? Yeah. You know what? I got this car. You can have it. There's stories like that out there that are more common than you think, right? Unfortunately, many of us do not pray and do not wait for God's provision. In a sense, we don't even give God a chance. We have this tool, we have this incredible, powerful God at our disposal, and we don't even access it. It's like I got to hammer a nail into the wall, and I got a hammer there, but I'm using a wrench to try to hammer that nail in, and there's a hammer sitting there waiting for us, right? It's crazy when you think about it, right? Again, God has instructed us to be content with what he has provided. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content whatever you have. That's Hebrews 13:5. I'm not done with talking about contentment, by the way. I mean, it's just such an important part of that journey. Financial deception number 6. Bankruptcy will solve my financial problems. The Bible is clear in that it is not God's will that we go bankrupt. Remember, it's not a sin to borrow money, but it's a sin not to repay. As we read in Proverbs 37:21, the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous gives generously. To be more blunt, bankruptcy is a sin. And as bad testimony, God instructs us in the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. So from Matthew 5, we're reminded that it's not a great testimony for a Christian to declare bankruptcy. How do you witness to a guy that you just stiffed on what you owed him money? And not only is it sin to declare bankruptcy, it goes against and teaches us a righteous person not only pays what he owes, which it's clearly implied, but goes the extra mile and gives generously even when there's no financial obligation to do so. That's the godly attitude that God wants us to have. So not only is it a sin and a bad testimony, bankruptcy just treats the symptoms again, right? Just like consolidating your loans. So big picture, bankruptcy does not solve our financial problems. The real problem is generally the violation of God's principles, which usually continues even if current debts are eliminated by bankruptcy. You know, stats show that 80% of people who go bankrupt get into financial troubles again within 10 years.
How would you talk to somebody who talks about the biblical principle of the year of Jubilee, of forgiving debts, and appeals it to
Yeah. And that's the Old Testament thing, right? Yeah, that's one of the things on the giving side in the Old Testament. So So if it's somebody that owes me money, is that what you're saying, kind of thing? Or somebody owes us?
Not legitimizing
Yeah.
bankruptcy feelings.
Yeah, so that's between, if I'm the guy that's owed money, that's between God and I have to have that discussion with God. For me to say, hey, you owe this person money, I would always counsel them, no, you have that debt. It's a sin not to repay that person. Because we're not living under the law anymore, right? And that's why the teaching of giving in the New Testament is about, it's not about percentages, it's not about every 3 years or every 7 years do this. No, we're not under the law anymore. So it's all about being generous and giving with a joyful heart. Yeah. I got an example. I'm going to give you an example of bankruptcy here in a second. So again, if we don't treat the root cause, bankruptcy is just a bandage, right? And again, this whole morning we're talking about the heart, right? We're not talking about math. Our finances is tied to our heart. Okay, that's a bit blunt. It's a sin. If you already have declared bankruptcy, I want to encourage you. I don't want to just, because somebody in this room might have already declared bankruptcy and feeling, oh crap, I'm a bad person, right? I want you guys to remember a couple things. God loves us, and God will forgive the act of bankruptcy if you confess that sin to Him. And this is for all of us. This is for all of us. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. In prayer, ask God to reveal to you the real causes of your bankruptcy. Learn from it. And then again, search me, O God, know my heart, test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there are any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. And 3, if you had declared bankruptcy, develop and implement a budget to ensure that you are spending less than you are earning, so that you have a surplus of non-monthly and unexpected expenditures taken care of. Being disciplined here will keep you from accumulating debt. I'm going to tell you a story of a friend of mine that ran into problems. So he bought a plant franchise. He lived in Ottawa. He did all of his due diligence before he bought it. Talked to the other franchise. Hey, is this thing profitable? Oh yeah. He bought it. Within a year, it was failing. He goes to the other guy, and he's, oh yeah, no, I forgot to tell you this, forgot to tell you that, right? It was crazy. So talk to advisors and lawyers and stuff. He said, well, your only thing here is you got to go bankrupt. So he goes to the lawyer, signs all the papers. He's driving home, and he was convicted. God was just convicting him like crazy. I just did a mistake. He gets home. He hasn't been home for 5 minutes. The lawyers call him back. Oh, hey, you forgot to sign one document. We need you to come back and sign one document. He goes, okay, I'll be right back. He goes back, grabs all the documents, and walks out and tears them out. So he listened to the voice. So what does he do next? He goes to the family members and all the people and friends that lent him money to start this franchise. And he sits down and he says, here, listen, here's the deal. I promise you I will pay you back. I don't know when, but I promise you I will pay you back. Goes to the bank. Okay, so here's the deal. So, I like to work out a plan, but I promise I will pay you back. The guy goes, this is a true story. The guy goes, well, just say, let me go talk to my manager. They come back and they say, no one has ever done what you're doing right now. We're going to forgive your loan. We have the ability to forgive so many loans. Your loan is forgiven. We are so impressed with, remember, be the light of the world? They were so impressed this bank forgave him as his loan. One person didn't forgive him. Who do you think that was? Bell Canada. He owed him $300. And they go, nope, you got to pay that. You got to pay it within this year. Right. It was ridiculous, right? I still don't use Bell, even though it wasn't my story. This guy worked 2 jobs to pay off those debts. He had kids. He already had kids. He worked 2 jobs to pay off those debts. Another opportunity came, and I won't go into the details of that. This guy today is probably worth $15 million. $15 million. Not a prosperity gospel. It's not what I'm teaching. But if we follow his ways and you dig, God will bless you sometime. This particular guy was blessed. He worked hard. As long as I knew him, he worked hard. Like really hard. But he was an amazing family. He was one of my mentors, amazing family. Taught me how to be a better husband and be a better father. Like this guy was amazing. I might have time to tell you another story with the same guy, but let's move on. That's a great example about bankruptcy, isn't it? Right? And how God honors us, our faithfulness. In summary, deception of this world is that bankruptcy will solve one's financial problem. That's what they want us to believe. That's your solution. Generally, the true cause of the problem is the violation of one or more biblical principles, and most of the time it's unknowing. So if you're a believer it's because we're learning this stuff. Some of you might be learning this for the first time now and you've been a believer for years. It's unknowing. It's not that you're a bad person, right? In dependence upon God, continue to learn and apply his principles. That's what your goal, that's what your responsibility is now. Psalm 32:8, I will instruct you and I will teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. That's his promise to us. We just have to heed it. So in review, living paycheck to paycheck, that's a deception. Another deception, debt restructuring will solve your financial problems. Another deception, smart people use other people's money. Sometimes it's smart, but a lot of times it's not. It's a risk. It's not a smart thing. God admonishes us not to use debt. If you talk to anybody that's really successful, lots of real estate, they don't have loans on them. All these amateur real estate investors buy these homes to rent out, but they finance every one of them. Now they're in trouble. The smart guys, they don't own debt on those real estate. They're just generating income for them. Financial freedom is attained by having lots of money. That's a deception. It makes sense to buy now and pay later. And bankruptcy will solve all of my financial problems. Okay, so I'm going to skip. Give me a second here. I'm going to skip this next section because I think we might run out of time. I want to get some practical stuff, and I really want to. I didn't know how much to put together because usually I do this over 12 weeks, and that's why it's a bit of a teaser. But let me go straight to, give me 1 second here. I'm going to go straight to how to get out of debt. Does that sound good? Okay. It's Roland, it's 11:14. Can I just go through this a couple more and then can we just keep going for just a little bit more? Like we said 11:30ish, right? Kind of thing. Okay, let's talk about some steps to get out of debt. The one that I'm skipping is God's wisdom on debt and savings. Again, sign up for the course, right? Because there's so much more value. You're just getting a little bit of a snippet, right? Okay, so practical steps to get out of debt. Oh, here's a surprise. What am I going to say first, right? Pray and ask God for his wisdom and a specific direction as to what you should do to become debt-free. God instructs us, if you lack wisdom, he should ask God, who will give generously without finding fault, and it will be given to him. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame, Isaiah 58:1. So remember, God promises to provide his wisdom and specific direction if we ask in faith and do his will. He promises that. As a practical matter, it is critical that you pray or you spend time, quality time, with the Lord in prayer. Reading his word and listening to his voice. And again, I want to say it, John 10:27, my sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. Regularly meditate on his word. I gave you my example how I sit in prayer, and then my knowledge of the scriptures, the simple knowledge of greed's a sin, simple. But that's what led me to a right decision. So regularly study his word is your second thing. And again, my statutes are my your statutes are my delight. They are my counselors. And your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. He will give us the direction we need to go. What are some examples of Christian violating God's principles when it comes to money? What are some examples of that? I'm almost repeating. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here. How about, let me give you a start. Maybe we'll start. How about having no savings for unexpected expenditures or expenses? That's a principle that we often fail to do. So again, it's going to be important to be budget for non-monthly costs, right? And have an emergency fund in place. That's one. What's another one? How about debt? What about, yeah? And taking on too much debt and not paying it back. So again, what are the causes of taking on too much debt? Spending more than we make is one. Going after the now versus the wait and save for it, or even let God provide in some other way. Those are the real reasons for getting into too much debt. How about we buy things we don't need because of covetousness or lack of contentment? And again, giving God the leftovers instead of the first fruits. How about that? That's violating God's principle. Here's another one, co-signing a loan. We never talked about this. So let me spend a little bit of time on this. In Proverbs 11:15, it says, it's a dangerous thing to guarantee payment for someone else. Don't do it. What are some options that we can do instead of co-signing a loan? What are some other options that we can do instead of doing that? Somebody comes to us and asks to co-sign for them. One option is we actually give them the money without expecting them to pay back, give them a gift. Or the other one is you say no, and then you teach them the principles in managing money. You're actually teaching them you're teaching them to fish, really. So what's the hardest time? When a child comes to us and says, Dad, I need you to co-sign, or Mom, I need you to co-sign a loan. Why do the banks ask for co-signers? What's that? Say it again really loud. Right. So the person that co-signs, they become responsible. But why does the bank say, I need a co-signer? Because sometimes they'll loan money without a co-signer. Why do they sometimes say we need a co-signer? They know that they're a high risk, that's right, that they won't be able to pay back that loan. You don't think they got a lot of experience, and they know what they're doing. They know what's a risk and what isn't. So they come to you and it says, hey, you got lots of money. I know you're safe. So if you co-sign this, then I'll give it to them. What is actually happening? You're taking all the risks. The bank's taking all the profit. They have no risk whatsoever now. Pretty much, because they got one guy, and then I got a backup plan. But I get all the profit. What do you get? You get all the risk. If a kid came to me, my son or daughters, I have 2 daughters, came to me, hey, Dad, would you co-sign a loan? My answer is going to be no. Not because I don't love them, but because I'm going to say, this is why the bank is asking you to get a co-signer, because you're not ready. You can't afford it right now. Let's work on getting you to be able to afford this first. Then I'll help them with that. That's what I would do, right? But that's really hard for some parents to do. But Bible doesn't say co-signing is a sin, but it really discourages it. 6, getting involved in an investment that they do not understand. This is a violation that we take, right? And that it was not biblically diversified. So, Proverbs 19:2, desire without knowledge is not good, and whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way. I've done this. I've invested in things that I did not understand. Without exception, I lost money on it. It went bust on me. Yeah.
Would there be certain types of investments indicative that you understand, whether it's like crypto or something like that?
Yeah.
That category?
I think that applies. But I'm not a crypto fan, and I know my financial advisors aren't a crypto fan either, right? It's a really hard thing to me to wrap my head around. It really is. So I don't get its volatility. I don't get its growth. And yeah, it's just, and how well is it received still in the global economy, and how easy it is to lose if you lose a hard drive, like all that kind of stuff that goes with it. Yeah, that to me fits into something I don't understand, and thankfully my investment firm doesn't either. Does that answer your question? Again, I am not a financial advisor, by the way, so don't ask me for financial advice, because I have people doing that for me, right? But I do have certain things that I do not want to invest in. Ecclesiastes 11:12, again, about diversification. The Bible even talks about this, right? Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, invest in 7 ventures, yes, and 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. This is typical investment 101, right? Everybody, most basic investors know this, that you got to diversify. But like a lot of things, there are sometimes exceptions to the rule. But only after you spend the right amount of time in prayer waiting. God may lead you to putting your eggs in one basket for a time. That's possible. Typically, I don't teach that, but it happened to me. But it was after a tremendous amount of prayer. Going back to that story where I invested in that company. So I did that, but I was working. I knew the guys that was running the company, and I knew that I was going to be participating in the value of that share. But as soon as I had a chance to diversify, I rediversified, and all future investments went somewhere else. So sometimes, but the Bible clearly says, like Ecclesiastes, invest in multiple different markets, because one market may drop and the other ones may go up. So you need to diversify. It's really a wise thing to do. Not having a budget, and as a result, making financial decisions based on gut feel, not the facts of your actual finances. Have your ducks in a row, right? And here's a clear verse about having your ducks in a row. Evaluate your present financial position, your assets, your liabilities, your revenues, and your expenses. Proverbs 27:23. Know the conditions of your flock. Get your ducks in a row. Be careful to pay attention to your herds. Now, we don't have cattle or herds, or most of us, unless we're farmers, but we do have salaries, we have incomes, we have hourly rates, we have rent, we have mortgage, we have car payments, or cell phone, internet, we have all that stuff. Know the condition of your flock. How do you know the condition of your flock? You track your expenses. You track your expenses. You have no clue what your flock is unless you can tell me. If you can't tell me how much you spend on groceries every month, you don't know the conditions of your flock. If you don't tell me how much you're spending on a restaurant, you can't tell me the conditions of your flock, because you don't know. And if you don't know that, you don't know whether you actually have a surplus or a deficit at the end of every month. But if you do know that, and you have a deficit, you can say, oh, I can cut out, I'm spending $400 a month on a restaurant. I had no idea. I only go to McDonald's and don't realize $25 there. Or, you think it's little, but it adds up so quickly. And you can knock off $400 a month on your thing that quickly without suffering a whole lot, right? That's just an example. You need to know that your financial facts. Decisions based on gut feel and personal desires, it's really, really dangerous. Okay, so that's again. So even if you buy a stick of gum for $1, track it. And you're going to say, well, it's only $1. But how many bucks are out there in a month? So if you stop losing track of that, you have no idea how many bucks you spent that add up to 10 or 20 or whatever. That's why I say, no matter what it costs, you track that. You track that expense. See, I'm weird, right? Isn't that weird? Development of cash flow. Again, a properly implemented budget will enable you to do what? Spend less than what you make every year, or every month, sorry. And what does that allow you to do when you spend less? Save and also pay down debt. Get a surplus so you can pay down debt faster, right? So whether you are in debt or not, always, I say maintain a budget. There are approximately 40 references in the Bible to planning, and generally they admonish us to plan ahead. 40 verses. So again, commit to the Lord with whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. So make prayer the foundation of your financial planning. Ask God to reveal how in your heart and mind His plan as to how you can reduce your debt and manage the money that He has entrusted to you His way. Proverbs 21:5, the plan of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Number 5, ask God to enable you to be content with His provisions. So often, people get into financial trouble by taking on too much debt. That's basically the issue. And it's because of lack of contentment. It can come from the form of selfishness, covetousness, or greed. And contentment is the antidote to those worldly attitudes. Philippians 1:4, Paul said, again, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, or whether living in poverty or in want. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. What is the secret of being content? It's I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. That's the secret. It was God who gave Paul the strength to be content, whatever the circumstances. Don't forget, Paul used to be a very wealthy man. He was climbing the corporate ladder in the Roman world. He was probably pretty well off and had his own servants and stuff. So he knows what it's like to be on both sides of the fence. It was Paul's personal relationship with Christ that was key to his contentment. Believe me when I say contentment is not found in what you have. Until Christ is all you have, you will never recognize that Christ is all you need. Mind if I say that again? Until Christ is all you have, you will never recognize that Christ is all you need. To get the true contentment, we need to let Christ be the all that we need first. Contentment kills comparisons. That's what it is. We compare ourselves to our neighbors or our friends. Contentment kills comparisons, and there is no win in comparisons, for it never, ever ends. Things will never make you happy or give you peace. There is always something else that they have that you don't have. And before you know it, you're deep in financial trouble when you realize that there is no end to comparisons. That's why contentment is so critical for your financial journey. Let's talk about strategies to paying off debt. Okay, so this one's going to take me a little bit of time. So if you're dealing with debt, here's a strategy on how to get out of debt. There's two strategies I'm going to talk about. The first strategy I call the math approach. You take the most expensive debt and the non-deductible debt first. So what's the most expensive debt? Typically it's credit cards, the highest interest rates, right? You list that first. And then the lower interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. And then like a deductible debt is, let's say you borrow money to invest in a Canadian company, the government allows you to write off the interest for that loan. So most of us don't have non-deductible debt. That's the math approach. So you get rid of the highest paying debt first and you just go from there. Keep going after the next one. The second strategy is called what I call the emotional quick win approach, or the psychological approach, is you list the smallest debt to the largest. Forget about the interest rate. It doesn't matter in this approach. The difference with this one is some people are math orientated, and that makes sense to them, the first strategy. The second one is it's an emotional thing. I have my largest interest debt is the largest, and it's taken me forever to get it, and you lose steam, and you kind of give up. But if you have a smaller one, even though it's the lowest interest rate, you pay it off faster, and you go, hey, I did it. Let's go do the next one. And you just build this momentum of excitement. And that seems to be much more effective for a lot of people. So whoever you are, pick one of these strategies. But either case, you want to list all of your debts in whatever order that works best for you. Even if it's your parents or somebody, like, obviously we don't have any younger ones, but if somebody lent you money at 0 interest, list it. You want to pay that off, right? Okay, now the snowball method. So you picked a strategy, you have listed your debts. This is how you want to approach it. So you got all your debts listed, and forget the mortgage for now. This is just, we're going after consumer debt, okay? So you make a minimum payment on the first debt and stay current with all the other ones. So let's just keep it really simple. Let's say we have 3 debts and they're $100 each. Let's just keep it simple. So you're paying $100 in the first one, and you got the mandatory is $100 in the other two. So you're paying them all equally each month. But you've done your budget, you've done your expenses, and you've seen that, and you'll be able to say, hey, I'm going to sacrifice here. I'm not going to go to restaurants for the next 6 months or whatever, or until I pay off all my debts. Or I can read, you know what? I'm going to take a look at my cell phone bill. Instead of paying $50 a month, maybe I can get that down to $30 a month. And for me and my spouse, so now that's $60 a month I've just captured. Blah, 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 blah. There's ways that you can make some sacrifice. Or, you know what? I'm not going to do cable. I'm going to save $135 a month, and I'm not going to have any cable in my house for the next whatever, right? These are just some ideas, right? So now you developed a surplus. So now you get so let's say this simple math, you found another $50. So you take that $50, you put that towards your first debt. So now you're paying, instead of $100, you're paying $150 a month. Once that first debt is paid off, the payment on that debt plus the extra money that you just found, like the extra $50, put it towards the second one. So now the second one, you were paying $100 a month. Now you're paying $250 a month on that debt. And you keep paying that, and you find more money, then you add it to that debt, right? You use the surplus to work for you. In this case, you're paying down debt. Once that second debt is paid off, then you take that $250 and you make it now as because remember this 100, now it's $350 a month. And you keep putting that $350 on that month until it's all paid off. That's that snowball effect, right? When you build the momentum, and when you build that momentum, you start to see light at the end of the tunnel. That gets you excited, and that gets you motivated. And all those sacrifices you're making, they don't become big sacrifices anymore. You're just too rejuvenated by what you're accomplishing. You're starting to see it actually work. That's the snowball method. So, as you implement this strategy, I want you to remember 4 things. As you implement this strategy, is this clear? By the way, do I need to explain anything more? Okay, again, I'm not a teacher, so I got to be careful that if I explain it properly. Okay, there's 4 things I want you to remember. It is easy to become wealthy if you don't have any payments. That is your enemy. It's what's stopping you from being financially independent, in my view. When paying off debt, remember, it is 80% behavior and 20% head knowledge. Number 3, as you implement your budget, you can develop a surplus of cash each month. You can do that. You can find stuff. You'll have to make sacrifice, but you will be able to find a surplus. And number 4, it is God's best for you that all debt is paid off as soon as possible. I believe it's God's best for you. And it's kind of logical to think that it is. Okay, so that's a bit of a big step there, but let's look at the seventh step to get out of debt. In dependence upon God, follow up and persevere until you're debt-free. Don't give up. Don't give up. You may have a curveball thrown along the way. You know, your journey may have a couple of curveballs, but don't quit. Take each curveball to Him in prayer and persevere. You will eventually get there. And I don't know who the audience is right now, but usually some in the audience that they're at their end. What do I do? God has promised us, even in our old age and gray hair, I am He who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. And then again, even if finances isn't your area of expertise, God has promised that He will provide what you need. Jesus said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. He will help you make the right decision along your way. He will help you with this. Trust Him with that. You're responsible. You just need to follow His teachings and give it to Him in prayer. When I say prayer, daily prayer. Let me ask you this question. Which is a higher priority, pay down debt or save for future needs? Pay down debt? Does everybody agree, or does anybody think? I would agree. Once you take that avalanche and pay off all your debt, then you can take that same avalanche and now put it towards your mortgage and now start saving for your future needs. So I think that's the right strategy to take. So just a bit of recap. Some practical steps to get out of debt. Pray and ask God for His wisdom and His specific direction as to what you should do to become debt-free. Number 2, regularly study and meditate on God's Word. Again, 20% knowledge and 80% behavior, though. Evaluate your present financial positions, your assets, your liabilities, revenues and expenses. Track your expenses. Number 4, develop and implement the budget. Number 5, develop and implement the budget. Number 5, develop and implement the budget. Is it getting through? Ask God to enable you to be content with His provision. And that may include some short-term pain for some long-term wins. Plus, never compare. Never compare. I don't buy new cars. I typically don't buy new cars. And I keep my cars for 15 years. And like my one vehicle is 11 years old. Because of COVID, I hardly drove it. So I think I'll go 20 because it's still in great shape. But that's me. I loved going down. I had pride in that. I'd be going down the 404 and work, and I'd be driving these beautiful, and I love nice cars. Don't kid yourself. You know, some nice new Audis and that, and I would say, I bet you have more money than you, because, you know what I mean? I didn't do that, but you know what I'm saying? I had this pride that the older my car got, the prouder I got for the stupid thing. Isn't that crazy? And when somebody dings my car, I really don't care. That's freedom. You know what I mean? That's freedom. We talk about freedom, but that's all a part of freedom. Stuff like that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. Life is just so much happier when you don't care about that. So the older it gets, the less I care about, because it's not going to be. I remember when I bought I had to buy a new vehicle. And the reason why I bought it was 2013. I always do the research. They were changing the model that year, a brand new, like the whole design was changing. So they had to get rid of this older model because this was April and August, the new models were coming out. They didn't want the dealers to have anything on there because I always look for used. Because the manufacturer gave the dealers $10,000 off, plus the dealer gave another $3,000. I looked on Kijiji or Auto Traders and all that stuff. That same vehicle a year older, used, was more money than that because they paid so much more the year before. The incentives were so strong now that the newer one was actually less than the used ones because they couldn't afford to sell it. It was just bad timing for them and good timing for me. But the guy so I decided to buy new for that one reason. Otherwise, they usually buy a year old, always. But the sales guy said, you maybe not want to buy this because this will be a really old looking in 3 months because the new ones is a whole new design. And I said, dude, that thing's going to be 12 years old when I'm done. There's going to be no residual value in that thing when I'm done. That's who you're selling to. So I could care less if that thing depreciates even more because it'd be so old looking because it's just that time. And so that's my world of vehicles. Vehicles are they're just a huge cost. Anyways, never compare. That's how do we get on that tangent? Sorry, but never compare. And with the surplus of your cash, pay off debt using the snowball method, and then again, in dependence upon God, follow up and persevere until you're debt free. Please don't give up. The reward is so great. The reward is so great. Okay, should we take a break? Oh, we're all back. Oh, great. Okay, so yeah, come on up. Okay, so remember we talked about how sometimes we don't give God a chance, right? And I said when you join a course, one thing that's so great about you have a group of people that are talking, sharing different stories that are really inspiring and also encouraging. So, got a story here we want to share you about letting God provide.
Bought our house. There was 5 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we completely exhausted ourselves of all of our finances. So we moved in June, and when I had a serviceman in our house, he happened to notice that there was a problem with my furnace. He says, I got to shut it off. It's condemned. It's got problems. So I said, okay, how much is that going to cost? He said, it's going to be $1,980 for this furnace, which is peanuts compared to what they are today. So I said to him, okay, I appreciate that. And I'm glad it was the summer or late summer because there was no emergency. So every other week on Thursdays I'd get paid. And I didn't know where the money was going to come from other than however I was going to find it. And I was in the office one day. We got paid every other Thursday with these white envelopes. This was an off Thursday. And I was like, I wonder what these envelopes are in there for. Could be something to do with benefits or something to do with company policy, but I pull the envelope out, I open it, and it says, Kevin, we had an exceptional year last year. Our company is doing very well, and we've decided to share a portion of our profits with you. Here is your portion. And there was a check in there with my name on it for $2,000. I needed $1,980. I was practically in tears. I'm standing there, there's truck driver in this office, there's guys all around me, and I walked out, I got on my phone, and I just said to my wife, you would not believe what just happened. And she couldn't believe it. And I said to her, at that time, there's even $20 left over for us to go to McDonald's to celebrate. But I appreciate and I thank Randy for giving me this opportunity because I'm going to end it right here because I have so many opportunities and so many events that have taken place in my life that it's just incredible how gracious God is, no matter how sinful, unrepentant, wicked, unremorseful, He is always faithful, He was always there, and He always brings us back. It's just amazing. So anyways, I'm glad that I can share this story with you. But my family that I'm a part of here, I'd like to hear these stories of yours as well from time to time, because as you all know, I can talk. Okay, so anyways, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Randy, for that.
That's great. Thank you. There's so many. That's what I said earlier. Like, there's so many stories out there if we just knew about it. But they're just so inspiring. And if you join that course, if you do a course, a lot of times they come up like that. Okay, it's 12 o'clock. So I'm going to take a risk here. I'm going to continue to do this, but I want to do some really practical stuff for you guys. So I'll go really quick through this, and I want to talk about budgeting because we're going to get into that. So the purpose of a budget really is to ensure that you spend less than you earn so that you can have a surplus, create an excess at the end of each month, so that you can pay down debt or save for future needs. So if I just do this real quickly, when we do budget, the goal is to say, okay, here are my expenditures, here's my income, and I want that at zero. Because I don't want $500 left over in every month. I want that money working for you. That's how I look at a budget. So where's that $500 going to? Well, it's going to go into an investment, or it's going to go to my mortgage, it's going to do something, right? So always maintain that zero, because you always want the money working for you. Either it's working to pay down debt, or it's working to create more income for you through savings. So that's kind of the idea. But you got to learn to spend, and it helps you. It's only with a budget and tracking your expenses will you know whether you're spending less than you're making. Let's see here. Okay, what does this verse say to you? God instructs his people to be sure to know the conditions of your flocks and give careful attention to your herds. What's he saying here now? Know the conditions of your flock. Yeah, right? Most people do not know where their money is being spent. Most of us, like majority, like not even majority, like 90+%, do not know where their money is being spent. Some are totally oblivious that their indebtedness is gradually increasing. A proper budgeting system, this is what it'll help you to achieve, is that the financial facts will become known. You'll know your financial facts and what you need to do in order to make your financial decisions. God admonishes us to have wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Like he admonishes us to do this. So how can we accomplish this in a practical fashion? We must do the essentials of budgeting. Track your expenses so that you know where your money is going. Develop and implement and follow a budget. Ensure that you are spending less than your earnings so that you have a surplus to pay down debt, save for future needs. And we're talking your future. So a proper budgeting system will provide financial facts for you. It gives you power. That knowledge is power. And your decision making becomes a whole lot easier and a whole lot stressless. You don't have that stress involved. Hey, can I buy this? This is a want, but can I buy it, right? But having a budget, you can know whether you can do that or not. And if you can't do it then, one day you can, because you've got that budget and you're working through that. I just want to say this, close with this. Proverbs 21:5. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. If this is a wise proverb that doesn't talk about the necessity of a budget, I have no idea what does, right? Develop and implement a budget is consistent with biblical principles. I hope you guys picked up on that today. It is a tool that if needed or if used properly, it'll be effective in planning your finances. It really will be. So don't let it scare you. This is what's going to happen if you haven't done a budget before. You're going to sit down, you're going to go, oh, what do I do here? I don't know. What do I put there? I don't know. I don't know. It's frustrating, and it's probably a very weak budget because it's not accurate, because you're guessing. That's why it's so important that you track your expenses. That's the knowledge you need. So think about it. I know exactly, I categorize what I put on groceries. I know exactly what I spend on food every month. Oh, that's easy. I know what that is. You just look back at your spreadsheets and it gives you all the information. You just plug it in. Now you can make decisions really easily. You can see let me show you some stuff. So I have to have my back to you. Sorry about that. This is just a tracking spreadsheet that I created for myself. Now there's others. There's a lot of stuff that's online as you can do right in your phone. That's probably a lot easier, less maintenance. But this is what I do for myself. And I'm going to explain this to you, only the concepts, okay? So you can see along the top, it's hard to see, isn't it, on the screen, but there's categories there, right? So those categories could be, let me just go like this here. So there's a lot of I like to know specifically where my money's going, because then I can make some certain decisions on it. So I'll have restaurants, I have clothing for my wife and I have man, there's tons of stuff, right? Like how much do I spend on Netflix? How much am I spending on restaurants? How much am I spending on comfort food? I do that, I'm crazy, because it's just something I don't need, right? And so how much do I spend on anything else, my tithing and all that kind of stuff, my givings and that kind of stuff. So what I do here, you see the months January to December. So here's January, for example. So anything that's in yellow, I plug in. So at the end of the month, I get a receipt for everything. At the end of the month, I grab those receipts and I label it. I go, okay, so this is my grocery receipt. This is how much I spent on groceries. And I'll put it in here for groceries. For example, so right here is groceries. I know you can't see because of the color. So I'll put in there then how many receipts I have for that month. It adds it up here automatically, and then that is transferred to this sheet here. Shows all the months. So I have a section on groceries. So it'll show me in the spreadsheet what did I spend in January, February, March, all the way to December. So now I can see trends on my grocery bill. Now, to me, this is just knowledge. I'm going, oh, my grocery bill is really going up. What am I doing? Oh, I'm buying a lot of too much tenderloin, or like whatever that is, right? Okay, I entertain a lot here, so, but I can control it because I see the pattern, right? Or I look at my restaurants. People go to restaurants, or they go to McDonald's. They do these little things. Man, it adds up, but you don't realize how quickly it adds up. Next thing you know, you look at you're like $450 a month on restaurant stuff. And then you see that's consistent for 12 months. You go, man, I am dying in debt. But, okay, so now I see the pattern because I labeled it as specifically, that's where that money's going. Starbucks could be another one, or Tim Hortons. Every day I stop at a coffee. How much is that really costing you a year? You don't know until you track it. But I got to separate. I got to say, I want to know specifically what I'm spending on Starbucks, because you know what? I can make coffee at home before I leave for work and save a ton of money. But you don't know that until you see it. So you may have a section on Starbucks. I don't, because I don't drink coffee, right? So, but for you, you may be. I just like to have certain categories because it helps me to be able to fine tune where I need to make sacrifice.
Like a detailed spreadsheet of like Starbucks or Tim Hortons, and then you have a main sheet where it's just like
One sheet.
or something like that. Yeah.
One sheet. Every one of those columns is a category. One might be Starbucks, right? And whatever, so you come up with those categories. And so all I did is I just created this spreadsheet so that I can, just each month, I just put it in whatever these are blank because I share this. If you want to copy this share spreadsheet, you can have it, right? But I leave it blank because some people may have, I don't have a mortgage anymore, so I don't have anything for mortgage, but you will have a section on mortgage if you have a mortgage, right? And then you can add whatever you want. And this is just mine. Like even entertainment, I can't read that, but let me just get closer here. So entertainment, that is restaurants, concerts, movies, sporting events, and vacation. That's entertainment to me, right? So I may have a budget saying, you know what, I'm going to allow us to go to one concert a year if I do, right? And I hardly ever go to concerts, so I might take that out, but restaurants is definitely one of them. So even if I meet somebody for coffee or I take one of my daughters out for a dinner, just like a father-daughter date, that goes into restaurants. So the point is that by tracking your expenses, however you do it, and you see the trends, you can make decisions. It's knowledge. Knowledge is power in this case. There's an others category, like I have here. This is house maintenance. This is medical maintenance, medical, clothing, or education. So I had to see that was bigger because my kids were in university, or you had to pay things when they're in high school. I had expenses there. That's gone now, thankfully. So now I just have books, things that I buy books. I'll categorize that. How much am I spending on? Because that to me is I want to keep value there. The far one here, this is other. I want to focus on this is an important one. This is the catch-all. This one is so important because there's so many things you cannot categorize. You can't have a spreadsheet that's 10 miles long because you're capturing every event. That's not practical, and it's just not. So there's got to be an others category where toilet paper or paper towels or, I mean, there's a million things that go on other. That's where it's important that you capture that, because when I show you the next one, it'll be the budgeting thing. There's an others category, and you'd be surprised how much money it builds up in the other. You'd be surprised, right? That's where you can get caught, right? We go, man, why am I in a deficit every month? Well, because there's so many things you're not capturing, right? So the other, and what I personally do, and again, I keep saying this is what I do because you don't have to do this. I'm just going to give you the concepts. When I'm in a month and I do others, so let's say I put in $10, I make a note. And I say, this was my tax bill, or this was something that's really unusual. So then I have to go, if I have a problem with other, I go, why is it so high? I can look back and say, oh yeah, okay, that's legit, that's not legit, that's legit. Because it's hard to remember, because they're individual, so I kind of label it. That's what I do. And you may say, man, that's a lot of work. In some ways it is. It's once a month I do it. It becomes really fast for me because but I'm just so motivated to keep this up. So motivated because it keeps me on track. But if you're dealing with debt and you got a problem, you've got to do this because your budget will never get done properly because you'll lack this. You lack this. And I say, because I'm teaching this, to this day I have no debt, but to this day I keep track every dime that we spend and I keep a budget. Right? So even my wife, I give ourselves a budget for clothing, right? Because I'm not big into it, she is, and so she doesn't care because she's got a budget, right? We agree on that together, and I don't care what she buys. Okay, so if you go to CoplandFinancialMinistries.org, this spreadsheet is on there for free for you guys to grab, and I want to walk you through this. I find my mouse now again. Do you know how I find the mouse? Like I can see it here. There. Ah, there it is. Yeah, it's because I'm on the screen. Okay. So this is just an example of something here, but okay, so there's Form 1. I'm going to go over Form 1, 2, 3, and 5 today. Form 1 is just really, and again, you get this from the Copland website for free. Form 1 is just you're listing your assets and your liabilities. Assets is being things that you own. Liabilities is things that you owe, right? So what do you have in your checking or in your bank account? What do you have invested? What's your real estate? If you have a house, what's it worth? If you sold it today, forget the mortgage on, just what's it worth if you sold it today? So you put that in there, and then any other retirement funds between you and your spouse or whatever, and then any other assets that you have. Things that you own, if you sold it, you could turn it into cash, or it's cash already. So that gives you your total assets of what you have available if you sold everything. And then your liabilities is, what do I owe? Do I have a credit card balance? Do I have a personal loan? Or do I have a personal line of credit? And do I have a mortgage? How much mortgage do I have on that house of mine? And you list those there, and then it tells you what all your what your debt is. And then it takes it and says, my net worth is, if I sold everything, paid off everything, I'd have $281,000 left for this kind of example. So this gives you a little bit of where you are when it comes to your portfolio. Then form number two, you want to put in your income. So if you're married, and this is your after-tax dollars. Don't put in your pre-tax. This is your actual money that you have available to spend, that you make per month. And you may have investment incomes, you may have just some miscellaneous stuff that you do on the side. So you want to put that in there because that $5,000 in this case is going to get captured on form number 5, and I'm going to get to that. So that's what you do here. You just list in what your incomes are. This is what we talked about today. This is what most people miss because they don't know. This is your non-monthly. This is stuff that doesn't happen every month, but will happen. Right? So you want to put money aside so that, let's say my transmission went on my vehicle, and you see there it says number 4, number 5, auto repairs and maintenance. So there I'm saying I'm expecting, again, when you start tracking your expenses over the years, you start to see trends about how much did I spend on auto maintenance over the last 3 years. So it becomes easier, right? Because you just know. So let's say on average, you know what? I think I'm going to need, my vehicle's getting older, and I'm going to save $2,400 in case something happens. So if you got a transmission or brake job or whatever, that's not an emergency, guys. You plan for that. So I'm going to say that's about $2,400 a month. This spreadsheet automatically divides that by 12, and it says I need to save $200 a month until I've saved up $2,400, so that if something happens, I got the money. Instead of saying my transmission went, I got to put it on my credit card and carry that loan, or I got to borrow money to pay for that transmission. You want to avoid debt at all costs. So you're planning for it. You're planning for the inevitable. Okay? So look at house maintenance, property taxes, house insurance, auto insurance, vacations, right? A lot of people finance their vacation by their credit card. We're just going to go away for 2 weeks and we'll figure it out when we get back. And they pay 3 times for that vacation without knowing it. When you can totally plan for it. Even for investments, how much do I want to put aside for RSPs, TFSAs, et cetera, et cetera? What are my healthcare costs? Again, so you track it. Is that me? Sorry. And then gifts, Christmas gifts and that kind of stuff. If you know what you're spending every year, or you set a budget for yourself, then you just don't go over it. But it all goes into here and is divided by 12. The only thing is divided by 60, which is 5 years, is your auto replacement, assuming that you're going to buy a vehicle every 5 years. I go every 12 years or so. But when you do that, you say, how much do I need to save each year? How much will that new vehicle cost me in 5 years? You divide that and you put that in on a yearly basis, and it'll tell you how much you need to save every month. So when 5 years comes, you're not taking out a car loan. You're buying what you plan to buy, and you buy what you can afford, and you've got the cash for it. You get what I'm saying? That's non-monthly expense planning. And then you see the other category. Whew. Whenever I help people with their finances and they give me that other, a lot of times they leave it blank. I don't know what to put there. And it's usually this much, right? So tracking your expenses is the only way you're going to know what the other category is. I'm shocked at how big my category and other is. And I go through it. It might be, no, yeah, we need that. We totally needed that. Totally. There was not a want in my other category. It's just amazing how it adds up. So that's important. So then again, you say per year, then it'll divide. It'll tell you what you need to save for every month. Now I'm going to go to Form 5. I'm going to skip this one here is tracking your expenses, like the one I just showed you. The reason why I don't use this one on top is because he has very few categories along the top. So a lot more has to go in other. I like to have more categories. That's just me. That's why I created my home, so I can break it down more. This might be fine for you, but that's I just don't use it. Form 5 is where it pulls it all together for you. So whatever's in yellow, by the way, that's a blank cell. You put a number in there. If it's not yellow like this one here, that means it's captured. For example, house maintenance, remember on the non-budget, it's captured it from form number 3 for you. It's telling you, I got to save $150 a month to have money aside for when a furnace goes or whatever, right? So the first one is, how much do I want to tithe or my giving to be? How much am I giving? So you put that in there. What's my rent or mortgage? Property taxes is taken from Form 3, so this particular one is $300 a month. The electricity, oh, I'm paying about $250 a month in electricity, this particular person. This is much you're paying on like Embers Consumers Gas or whatever to heat the house. This is my water sewer bill. This is all my phone, my cell phones, my landlines if I still have it, internet, TV, all that fits into there. And then again, this is house maintenance and insurance that you're capturing. Because you know every year you're going to get your house insurance is going to be due. So I want to say put money aside every month so that when that bill comes, I have the money set aside for it. Gives you a total, it adds it all up for you. Say my housing costs, including my mortgage payment or rent, is $2,655 a month. That's just this one example. This particular family is paying $700 a month on food, so that goes into there. And then the automobile, again, this person is not saving to replace a vehicle. But if you look at their budget, you see they're in a deficit of $1,000. They're spending $1,000 more a month than they're making, right? So that's why they're not saving for that. This is for gas and oil for the car, insurance for the car, and then maintenance for the car that they're putting aside in advance. So their total is $783 for their car, automobiles, whatever they may have, two of them. Here are the liabilities. Okay, I have a credit card. Minimum payment is $300 a month, first of all. And they may have, not your mortgage is up top. So you may have a personal line of credit. Okay, what's my minimum? What am I paying on that? And you put all of your debts payments in this area here, outside of your mortgage, and that gives you what they have to pay to maintain those debts. This particular person is spending $275 at a restaurant. They're saving $175 a month to have a vacation once a year or whatever they do. And then they may have a membership to a gym or something that costs them $50 a month or whatever. So the total recreation or entertainment is $500 a month. And then they have a clothing budget of $250 a month for that family. They're not putting money aside for investments because they don't have anything left over. Their healthcare cost works out to be $125 a month, and then they have life insurance or disability insurance. And then they're not saving for their kids' education or anything. That's not in their budget. Gifts. So they spend so much, so they got to save $75 a month. So when Christmas comes, or birthdays come, or baby showers come, they got money set aside for that they budgeted for, and then that's the total there. So the total, that's the other category. Mine's higher than 300, and I'm really careful. So, and that's why I find that important. So the total on the miscellaneous is $375 a month. So they're making $5,000 a month. You add up all those things, they're spending $6,000 a month. So this couple's going, we're in trouble. Every month, I go into $1,000 more into debt. Every month. That's huge. So what you do then, now that you say, and again, let's assume you've tracked your expenses for a while, so you have pretty accurate numbers in here. Let's assume that. Now you know what to do. You got that decision to make. Okay, how do I get to a surplus? How do I cut $1,000 out of that thing? And we won't go through that today, but you would sit down and say, okay, what are some easy ones to hit? Okay, I don't have to eat in restaurants, so let's just do this. Sorry. It's hard to do it this way. So I'm going to eliminate that. Okay, we're in trouble. We're going to do stay vacations. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to stay. We're going to do day trips. We're going to sacrifice right now. We're going to sacrifice. I'm going to look for whatever I can. I'm being really quick here. I'm not analyzing too deep. So I'm going to make that zero. In fact, I'm not going to make it zero. I'm going to make it $250. I'm going to make it $50 a month or $35 a month. Right? Just so that it's something we can do, but it's going to be more of a stay vacation. We're going to go to the zoo or something. It's a sacrifice. I get it. But right now, we're spending more than we're making by $1,000 a month. This is a critical situation. So we're going to sacrifice short term for the long-term gain. Because eventually, when I get out of my debt, I'm not gonna have $1,000 a month problem. What else can I change? Oh, man, $250 a month for phone and internet and that kind of stuff. First thing I'm gonna do, okay, what kind of phone plans are out there right now? I do it every year. My wife and I just had a plan that we were like $55 a month for 6 gigs of data. Boxing Day, we found one for $29 a month for 30 gigs of data. It was Fido, like the subsidiary of Rogers. But Virgin was doing the same thing, which is a subsidiary of Bell. But remember, it became a political issue because the Canadian cell phone plans were the worst in the world. I'd go to Europe and I'd buy a SIM card for $30. I could call all of Europe and have unlimited data for £30 a month. I'm going, this is ridiculous. And I'm paying $60 for like 6 gigs and blah, blah. It was terrible in Canada. We're the worst in the world. Became a political system. Now we're actually better than the States. I'm finding plans that are better than the US. So stay on top of that. But you see, and I'm looking at it going, man, so let me do a little bit of work here. Let me see if I can reduce what can I get a new plan for? It'll motivate you to take a look what's out there. And again, these plans, there's specials that come at Boxing Day or Black Friday. That's when you get these deals, right? Do I need to watch TV? How important is that? To $1,000 a month? Can I cut that out for a while? Because the cable can be pretty expensive, right? Maybe I can just get Netflix for $11 a month and get rid of my $100, Yeah, I can't watch the news, but there's other sources I can get. There's sacrifices that you're going to make because the goal is to get rid of your deficit. So let's just say, let me just change this to $95, just hypothetically, right? I'll just go 96 that I typed it in. So now we're down to we just did 3 things that we looked at, and we're now down to $488. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But you see what we're doing? We're analyzing, we're saying, where can we sacrifice? What can we do? $700, okay, how can we cut down our food bill or that kind of stuff? Or clothing. Maybe I can squeeze something out of clothing for a while right now. Just have to wear stuff longer. Yeah, I'm sick of wearing that, but I'll do that for another year or two, right? Like, how much is our closet full of stuff that we never wear, and we keep it there for a year or two until finally we give it to Goodwill, right? So start wearing them again. I could go on, but there's so many areas. What's that? The gym membership. The gym membership. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to run at home. I'm going to run around the block more. That's right. Let's take that. Yeah. I'm going to reduce my food. Yeah. So, but you're right. That can go quickly. But you see how we're getting there. That's what a budget does for you. It's a cash flow plan. And eventually I'm going to get that to 0. So if I get that to a surplus, let's say I get that to, let me just try to figure this out here. Just for hypothetically, I'm just going to reduce this even though that is not. Let's say I get it to a $268 surplus. And let's say I'm not going to leave food at 0, obviously, right? But so I got food filled in and I got $268. I don't want that to go in the bank. I want it to work for me. So what I want to do with that $260, I want to put it towards my credit card debt. I want to put it towards that. So I'm going to add $260 to that $300 a month until that's paid off. Get rid of all my debt. And then so that money is now reapplied, and I'm going to put that. Let's say I do that, right? Just simplicity. So now I'm going to put way more money towards that debt. Let's assume that's just because I'm trying to be quick here. So that's now 0. Every dime I got working for me. Once that's all paid off, now I got a surplus. Where am I going to put it? I'm going to start saving for future. I'm going to start putting money into replacing my automobile. I'm going to put money into investments. And I'm going to put money into my mortgage. Right? Now you can start playing with that money and get it to work for you so that you never go back to debt. It's that simple. All we're talking about is discipline. It's all we're talking about now. If you deal with the heart and say, What does God admonish me to do? Let me follow. I understand his principles now. The guide is there, written for you, black and white, and we went through a lot of it today. It's there. Everything that you need to do is there. What's causing me to have a deficit? And it's probably in that others category, right? I went out and bought, no offense, okay, the ladies. I bought new shoes because we're going to this gala at the church, and I know so and so has this really nice, or I'm going to the Home Depot, and I got to get this new drill because it's brushless and it's way better, and it's going to be right. And even though I use it 4 times a year, right? It's just all these little things that we have, and then that contentment stuff, right? You know what? It makes sense to get a new vehicle every year, because if I don't, the maintenance is going to get so high that it won't make sense. I better get a new vehicle. That's not true. If you maintain your vehicle, 12 years old, it's not going to drain you. Like I drive, we're talking about that, right? Anyways, I can go on and on and on. The point is that it's possible. It is more than doable. It just takes discipline, and this gives you the power to do it. And it starts with it starts with the heart, and then the practical stuff starts with tracking your expenses, and then doing the budget. And every month you take a look at this, and you always have your money work for you. It's always something you want it to do for you. It's either paying off debt or is generating future savings for you.
Right, a big one is you haven't mentioned it, is pets.
Yeah.
Pet ownership, depending on whether you have a dog or a cat. Just the average person to look after their dog properly, you're looking at $2,500 a year.
Yeah.
Between dog food and two. So I noticed because I have a dog.
Yeah.
Dog food and 2 vet bills. And
Yeah.
it's just the spring and the fall. You're looking at $2,500
Yeah.
to $2,700
Yeah.
a year to do it right.
That's right.
So after all this, working on that, so you want to do, like you said, save for at least 6 months of income. So when would you do that now? Like, since you're trying to.
Good question. Really good question. So right now it's pretty hard to do that, isn't it? With this budget, let's say. So you want to first grab, at least if you can kind of grab $1,500 and put that aside. It's not going to be for your whole month. It's just a start. And you get that in place as soon as you can. And then as you continue to work through this over the months and you pay everything off, your debt, first thing you do is build your emergency fund up to 3 to 6 months.
So you don't touch that. You just kind of.
You don't touch it. That's separate. That's for the emergency. That's if you lose your job and you don't have severance. Whoa, can you imagine the stress of that? Right? Because some of these expenses you can't get away from. Right? So $1,500 won't cover it, but at least it's a start. At least it's a start. But once you get all your debt paid off, then you want to increase that. Then you want to focus on that first. Get your 3 to 6 months up, and then you start working on investing, saving for the future, and working more on your mortgage in parallel.
Work on your expense too.
You always save your expense, and then you start deciding now. Okay, maybe I'll start allowing us to go to a restaurant once a month or whatever. You make those decisions for yourself, right? Because don't forget, you're making sacrifice along the way. It's tough to say, hey, listen, our anniversary's coming up, and we got $1,000. Let's just do something special. You got to be more creative, right? But eventually you can say, hey, you know what? We're doing well now. We got ourselves in control. We know exactly our plan. You can reward yourself. Even if you don't have all your debts paid off, but you got a plan. You now know where the future holds. You know how long it's going to take you to get out of debt. And so you may want to say, let's go for dinner this one time for our anniversary in the year. Right? So it was a lot of pain to get out, but it sure was easy to get in, wasn't it? That's why you want to stay out of it. When you get out of debt, you never want to go back. You never want to have to battle through it again. Right? You never want to go battle through it. And I bet you most wealthy people, if you interviewed them, they talked about getting out of debt. Those who say, oh, you're crazy, use other people's money because I built up all this, That is not a true wealthy person. A wealthy person will tell you they have very little debt or no debt. Right? That's the truth. That's the truth. You just don't hear it. Our world is set up on making money on debt. That's what the media is going to do. That's what the advertisements are going to do. That's what you see and hear every day. Remember my trip to Europe where I'm backpacking? First time I took away all that influence. And that when God gave me that aha moment, going, man, I got nothing, but I am so happy right now. I don't need that. I didn't realize I didn't need that. As a 20-year-old something, you think, oh, this is what I got to do to be happy. I didn't realize the influence it had on me. But it's strong. It's marketing they put millions of dollars into research and marketing. It works, right? And we don't know that it works. So, is that kind of clear? It gives you, again, this is a teaser course, right? There's a whole section that talks about budgeting. So they'll give you a couple on the course and talks about how you can, come up with this, make it a better plan. So whenever I get a budget, this is really common. Somebody comes to me and says, hey, can you help me with my finances? We're struggling. It's okay. First thing you got to do is do a budget and start tracking your expense because they're not doing that, guarantee it. The first one will come to me and they'll show a $600 surplus. And it'll take me 3 minutes to say, oh, this, boop, 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 you missed this, you missed this, you missed this, because they don't know. We got to train ourselves how to do it. And so when I spend 5 minutes on it, I'll probably correct it with them, saying, okay, well, you missed this. What do you think you spent on this? Well, I'm guessing this. And next thing you know, they're like $600 in the deficit. That's how much of a switch it is. And then it opens their eyes and go, oh, I had no idea. That's okay. Now let's work on a plan to figure that out. So, and so for me, I say this to you because if somebody came to me and says, I want help, I have one rule. I'm not going to charge you, but the rule is if you don't do the homework, I'm out. I'm not going to volunteer my time, and you're not going to put the effort in, because some of it's going to be painful, right? I'm out because I'm not going to waste my time. Because it's that 80%, you got to do it, and it's painful when you start. It's painful when you start, but man, it builds momentum. It gets way more fun. Budgeting is actually fun for me now because I'm weird, yes, but it's working. So it's motivating for me, right? And it gives me and I still run into the same things where I got to get I want to buy something. My wife and I are looking to buy something, and we've been in prayer over it for a year now, And when we first started the process, we had an opportunity to buy something that was perfect for us, but I had to say no because I didn't have my ducks in a row. I didn't know the condition of my flock. I didn't know if I could actually afford this. So we had an opportunity that we lost because of it. And I'm still upset about it, but it was my fault. It was my fault. I didn't have my ducks in a row. I wasn't ready. So then I spent the next 6 months getting ready for that, and now we've been looking ever since, and still God hasn't provided. And so our prayer is, because it's a want, but our prayer is, if God doesn't want us to have it, we're waiting for him to say yes or no. Right? We're still waiting for that. And so that journey never ends. Right? That journey never ends. And it's not a bad journey. It's a great journey. It's a stress-free journey. Right? And that's where we want to get to, right? And so we talked about people with more money, the more stress they get. We don't have that because we know everything belongs to God. Last summer, in the summers, we work at a camp, so we're there all summer long. My wife and I decided to help out this camp for right now. So last summer, we thought we'll come home every so many weekends just to see the kids and then go to our home church. Our pastor, he's got 6 kids. Yeah, there's a couple of families in our one that has 9 kids. It's incredible. Anyways, he has 6 kids, and they wanted to sell their house and move closer to the church. How do you have your house ready to sell when you got 6 kids living in it? It's never in show mode, right? So they figured we got to move out so that the place stays in show condition. And so I said, hey, why don't you move into our house, right? We'll just stay away for 2 months, and you got 2 months to sell your house. And even our pastor, I slapped his hand for it, but He said, "That's so nice of you. Thank you so much." No. Honestly, it's not our house. My wife and I have this attitude. It's you know what, we're told it's not ours. God uses it however. It says you thank Him for it, not us, because He provided it, right? That's the attitude. That's why I don't get stressed over money or losing money, because, right, I just follow His principles, and it's worked up to this point, and I know it'll work going forward, right? As long as I stay faithful to His principles that we're learning here today, and we apply it to our lives forever, and teach it to your kids. Because we have to resist the worldly perspectives and the worldly influences. And if we're not doing that, our kids won't be doing it. And if we let other people influence us, right? If we learn to resist that, our kids are going to be so much better off. My kids I have a daughter who's 25 years old, and another daughter's married. She's 27. She married a guy he's weird like I am too, right? Like when he asked him to marry my daughter, they were still in university, 22 years old. Yeah, so I was little. And you know how he asked? He brought a spreadsheet. He's an engineer. He brought a spreadsheet to show me exactly, he showed what his potential income will be while he's still in school. And he had this plan that, he's going to do an internship as an engineer and get money this year, and then for my daughter to finish her last year, and then she's going to get a job, and he's going to go back and finish his last year. And then he showed his potential tax implications. He had this complex spreadsheet. It was amazing. I always said, I never said yes to him, but I said yes to his spreadsheet. Right? So that's my kids. And my daughter, 25 years old, she invests a ton every month with our financial advisors that they can come under our umbrella. I'm just ecstatic for them, right? I mean, they're doing so much better than I was their age. My goodness, I didn't have my act together till 30s. Right? So everything I'm teaching now, I wasn't doing a lot of this stuff in my 20s. I had these aha moments, but still wasn't fully grasping all the concept. Copland Ministry really helped me with this stuff. Like seeing the scriptures, like you just saw all these different verses come together in one discussion, right? All over the Old and New Testament that applies to everything in our life. That's what you learn today. So this class that we offer, or there's several classes, one that's just on high interest rates and inflation. How do you deal with it? There's one on that. This one here that I did today was 12, just following biblical principles. It's 12 weeks. And people in that class come 2 or 3 times. Even today, you're going to remember 3%, 2% of what you heard today. That's just the nature of the thing. We went through a lot of stuff today. So you're not going to remember it. Take the class. Take it 2 or 3 times because you want this thing to sink in. Memorize the scriptures. It helps, right? The scripture about, God owns everything. The scripture about savings, the scripture about debt. Memorize that stuff just because it refreshes our mind, right? So if you're struggling with it, there's lots of avenues to get out. There's lots of ways to do it. Bible has provided that for us. So pretty cool, eh? That's pretty cool. Anyway, so it's 10 to 1. Any questions, or I could go for another 2 hours to be honest with you, but yeah, we skipped a whole section. So, and then I kept a whole bunch out too. So, anyways, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. I hope this was of value to you today. And again, don't thank me. Right? This is me being obedient to God. I'm doing the same thing that I'm asking you to do in your life. And if anyone you want to thank, Tom Copland is he's an inspiration to me. The way that he runs his ministry, and so I'm just sharing with you what he's done for me, so take advantage of this man while so and join the class, and then if you need help, contact the ministry. Say, hey, listen, I need some help, and then they'll assign you a coach and that kind of stuff. And I hope that coach will do the same thing that I do. Say, if you're not doing your homework, I'm out, right? Because it's so important that you actually do the homework. I had somebody come to me, and she just wanted me to do the work for her. And you could tell that she had people coming in to clean her house for her, because she was a kind of a victim type mentality. And she was so used to that she kept on insisting that I do it for her, because I can't do it. But you can read between the cracks, and so I stopped helping her, right? In fact, she went through 2 coaches and we couldn't help her because she just didn't want to do it. She just wanted to be done for her. Another example of a lot of couples, when they come to us for coaching on their finances, the marital issues have already started because they've been in trouble for a while, and that creates a lot of divorces over finances is still the number one reason. So by that time, it's really, things are rough. I've had a couple on Zoom, and they would be telling me the problems of their marriages, each one of them, and they're right beside each other. And I'm going, you guys know you're right there, right? And so what happened for that one, I says, for us to come up with a budget, and you guys, we don't even know if you're going to survive your marriage at this stage. You need to go to counseling first. Because we can spend time doing a budget, and it can be thrown out the door in 6 months because you guys split up. That budget means nothing anymore. So the root cause is they got to fix their mortgage and then come back and let's work on that budget. So there's these things that, we can get to where it interferes with our plan, but they're still really critical for us to get to our goals. Right? So these are just some examples. We had one lady come to us and say, hey, I got financial problems, but okay, well, let's talk about it. Okay, the first thing you talk about is the debt. Okay, well, let's talk about how much debt do you have? Oh, I don't have any debt. Really? That's the first time I've ever heard that. Okay, so you don't have a mortgage? No, yeah, I have a mortgage. Oh, do you have a car loan? Yeah, I have a car loan, but everybody has those, so I don't count it as debt. But that's how far people can get influenced. This is life. That's just life. That's not debt. That's life. Right? So then you realize we dug in that. We realized, so now she realized, oh my goodness, now I know why I'm in trouble, because her whole mindset was completely corrupted by the influences around her. So we get stories like that, right? So it just tells you how important it is to know the scriptures so that we can see the red flags. We don't get influenced by the worldly perspective, because the world wants you to be in debt, right? They want you to be in debt because they make a ton of money off of you. Right? So think of it this way. You can't build wealth when you're in debt. You can build other people's wealth through your debt. You just can't build your own. And that's very true. You can help them put their kids in a Ferrari, but you're never going to be able to get your financial independence on debt. That's why I teach. It's just, I'm so debt adverse that I just can't do it. And that's why my wife and I became debt free at 45. So I'm going to tell you a story about that. So we had a bunch of furniture that I bought long before we were married. And I was 33 when we got married. So I had all this furniture that I had living on my own. My wife inherited some furniture from her mom, old stuff. So long story short, a few years into marriage, the couches started to rip all over the place, right? You know how furniture does that? I used to say this joke that, you know how whenever you clean out your couch, you always find this loose change? Well, our couches were so ripped, the loose change had a hard time finding a place to hide, right? That's how bad our stuff was ripped. My wife and I sat down and we said, okay, we're not going to buy new furniture until we're completely debt-free, mortgage and everything. And so we made that commitment to it. So my wife went out and bought these covers that go over the couches to, so they don't look so bad, but still they're fairly comfortable to stay. And so she did all that. And we have friends that are well off, and we didn't stop us from inviting them over. Because our goal, our motto was, we're not here to impress you with the things we have. We're here to share with you the things we have. I didn't care if they were lawyers or doctors and that, which they were, that have way nicer homes. To this day, most of our friends have a nicer house than us because we're content with it. So we finally became mortgage free. First thing we said to each other, well, why don't we get some new furniture now? So we started looking for furniture. We haven't looked for a long time. Started looking for stuff we liked, and oh my goodness, was it expensive? We forgot about how expensive it was. So we looked for about 6 months and kind of got discouraged by it. And so we stopped looking. And the reason why we stopped looking, because we were still totally content. My wife and I really embraced the contentment part of life. We said, let's just stop looking, we're fine with what we have. But 3 months after we stopped looking, I get a call from one of the furniture stores. Hey, Randy, remember that Italian set that you guys liked? I go, yeah. We're down to our last one. We just want to get rid of it. We'll give you 50% off if you want it. 3 months later, we'll give you 50% off if you want it. Yeah, great. I'll be back. I'll be in to see it. And then we negotiate another one. We save thousands of dollars. Literally thousands of dollars in 3 months because we had the contentment to say, let's just keep with what we got. And it was all crappy rip stuff. That's what contentment can do, right? And so that was an aha moment for us, because trust me, when we look back at it, we go, wow, this is God at work. This is God at work, where we just saved a ton of money. We had the money, but we saved a ton of money because we had contentment in our hearts. Right? That's why I say it's half the battle to get out. And when you're out, don't lose that contentment. Don't compare. Don't compare, right? Never compare with your kids. There'll always be somebody that has a nicer house, a nicer car, or whatever. Right? We love our house. In fact, our girls are gone. We don't have to downsize because it's not a big house. It's perfect for us right now, right? So, anyways, those are just a couple of examples more. I got one more story if you want to hear it before we got 4 minutes. This friend of mine came into a lot of money. He had shares and he sold it in his company and that kind of stuff. Came with a lot of money. And I say this because this is an inspiration to me. So he went out and bought a rare, limited edition BMW. Now, up to this point, this guy did the same thing. He drove a van for 12 years old. You know, he did the same thing. But now he came along and said, I'm going to buy myself a nice car. He goes to church, and he bought it this week. He's in church that very first week he had it. This young adult kid came up to him as he's parking the car. He goes, oh man, Dave, that is an awesome car. That's what I want to get when I get old. That's exactly, and just raving about his car. Dave, the guy who owned the car, he goes, oh my, that is not the legacy that I want. That is not the message I want to give to kids. The next day comes around. This is a true story, guys. Monday comes around. He goes back to the BMW dealership and says, I don't want the car. So they bought it back from him. And he goes, Randy, I was used to not having that money, so I just donated it. And I went back to my old cars. Kept my old cars. He donated the money. Didn't even keep it. Because I was used to not having it, so I might as well not keep it. You know, and so I say that's a story of a guy not telling you how to get rich, but tells you how to be rich. From a godly perspective, right? It's okay that you drive nice cars, if you can afford it. But for him, that wasn't what he wanted to leave as a legacy. That same guy was the guy that went bankrupt years earlier. That I was telling you about. Same person. So, right? You see how God gets a hold of you? It's not about the money anymore, right? It's about just being and hearing God's voice. So, I find that's a cool story. I like that story. So.
Can you please clarify how we can have access to the 12 course?
Yeah, so if you go online, Copland, I don't know if you can do it there or show it up on the screen, but if you go online, coplandfinancialministries.org, there's always a list of classes that are being taught at that present moment or that's going to be starting in sometime soon. You just click on it and register with your email address, and then you'll get a link. If it's a Zoom meeting, you'll get a link to that, and then every month, every week, when they have that class coming up, you'll just have that link. It'll be the same link actually for every meeting. It'll be set for a certain time of the week, and a certain day and a certain time of the week. It's free. It's all free. You know, there's a booklet I would recommend you to get that goes with it, that follows along with it. And it's $40, or the PDF version is like $15. And even then, and I know Tom won't mind me saying, if you have a really struggle financially, Just let them know, and then they'll send it to you. This ministry does not make money. Tom finances this ministry. So he does take donations, but he has a county practice that he keeps going to help finance the ministry, right? Yeah, he's an incredible guy. But yeah, so you go online. It's really easy. Just go online. That must be me still, eh? Let me do. If I unplug this. Oh, that's yours, right? Right. Yeah. So and there's tons of videos, tons of stuff, right? So yeah. So scroll down. Right there. See upcoming events. So you see, what's that one? March 16th to June 1st. That's Money God's Way by Christine's leading that. So you just click on more details. And then it gives you a little, then you just register. If that time frame works for you, it tells you what day of the week it meets. And then you're in. Then you'll just get a link to that. If it's a Zoom call, you'll get a link and you're part of the group. So that tells you a little bit what that event is. Until you saw the one today that they put on the website for the church today, so that'll disappear now. But you just go back to the website, and there'll always be courses. I typically don't teach one until the fall now because of the ministry and the camp that my wife are involved in. But there's some other ones, and we're trying to get more teachers. So I'm talking to a few people so we get more classes going. Some may be a Saturday morning, one's a Tuesday night, or a Wednesday night, or a Thursday night.
The courses are online?
Yeah, so that would be by Zoom. That would be by Zoom. And if you can't even do that, I think even you go under interactive videos. You see in the top there? Just go to one more over, interactive videos. See that? That's actually the 12-week session. If you click on one of those, you can actually listen to a video of, just click on, that one, session 1, for example. You can actually click on videos, sections, like Tom will actually walk you through, and that's one is on, does our impact with money, impact our relationship with God, or does our relationship with God impact the way we handle money? So that's what session 1 is. And you can even just watch it there. Tom's just sitting there walking you through the session, right? So you can even do it that way if you want, on your own pace. So tons and tons of stuff. And then for budgeting, if you click on budgeting, that's where you get that spreadsheet that I showed you today. So you see there, you go down. There's even instructions on how to fill in the spreadsheet, but that's the spreadsheet itself. And then there's videos on how to fill it in. That's Tom there. So tons of stuff, guys. You got no excuse. Right? It's all there, and it's all free, and it's all, he just wants to make a difference, right? So, any other questions? Well, it's 1:03, so thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.